Hello.
Hey everybody.
Well, hello.
Bonjour.
Put
I
marshmallows up on my
immediately
shirt.
forgot every other word that means hello in another language, but it's fine.
Welcome to our mukbang video.
Oh,
We're eating keto salad and popcorn, was it?
Yeah, popcorn,
Marshmallows
hot
and hot
chocolate.
chocolate.
hot chocolate with
Yeah.
marshmallows, because that's what you do when it's raining and you have kids.
Oh, now
That's
I
true.
really. I've
Alrighty,
just
who do we
started the
have?
stream. I can't go and
Okay,
just
hold on.
get a cup of tea right now, can I?
You
What if
could.
I
and
could.
Go
All right,
get some
let's.
tea.
I'm gonna do
We'll.
quick intro. Hi everyone, welcome to Q&A stream. We're gonna be if you were with us through COVID, you're pretty familiar with this format by now. Haha. But yeah, send us your questions and such in the comments. There's about a 15-second delay on them, so just be aware of that. If there are any technical issues, also put them in the comments, and I am going to get a cup of tea.
So I asked people for questions on the event yesterday. So if you're one of those people, we will be getting to those questions first to give it time for other people to ask questions. So you can start putting questions in the chat if you want, but we'll be getting to the ones that were put up on Facebook yesterday, just, burning questions. Yeah, I just realized Hodge is a cat, and that makes me very happy.
I have a cat and a swivel chair, so I can just go.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Bond.
Okay,
I don't have a cat, but I've got
Oh,
an old
shoulder
friend.
cat.
I have OG Gata. Actual Gata is in a box downstairs. Oh, beautiful! Strigas's helmet. How cute. I'll give it a little smooch. Yep. Okay. We'll go on to questions. Helena's put like 50 in here, so I'll do like 2 of Helena's, and then we'll duck down to other people and then come back.
Not like Helena to do. That's really
Why
weird.
does your helmet have lip-shaped rust marks on the faceplate?
First one is about behind the scenes of the Dragon Lair. I might wait till Addie's back for that because
I mean,
the Dragon Lair
technically,
was...
still talk. I'm just in the kitchen.
Okay. Oh, I forgot you have magic headphones. Okay. So, can we hear about behind the scenes for the Dragon Lair at the Weekender? Why were there challenges? Why were there challenges, those specific challenges, and how great did our faces look at the reveal?
So are you talking? I assume this is not. Is this about like the technical side of it, or like the plot side of it?
I think this is more about the actual traps and stuff, which is more.
Sounds a little like both, but
The question,
Yeah.
was,
I mean,
question was about behind-the-scenes things. I think they're asking about what like how it was all set up and what was hard to do and what was easy to do. And
yeah.
well, the technical side of it was really an Addie Becky sandwich. I definitely won't be covering that. The reason for adding in what were supposed to be traditional D&D, like we're talking like second edition D&D style traps, was an homage to that because LARPing is so heavily influenced by D&D. And also the fact that Scy'kadia, being a live action role play as opposed to a battle game, has always been intended to have more like puzzles and things like that. And sometimes it just boils down to, even what we built cost a fair bit, just in terms of like hours to put together the swinging axe blades that folks did, and things like the dropping ceiling and stuff. As much as that was a very simple effect, it's still timber from Bunnings. It's still like memory foam and stuff. And given the economy that we live in, it's like you can barely afford bread, let alone memory foam. So it's so a lot of the time we would love to do more of this. And also it boils down to the venue as well. Like with our regular venue, we can't build a lot of standing structures because it takes a lot to transport them, takes a lot to then store them as well, because we've only got so much garage space. And unfortunately, we can't use the actual venue itself for storage because of historical reasons, as in like heritage listed buildings and whatnot. So unfortunately, our hands are tied. So moving forward, we would love to build more of that. We would like to have more puzzles based on essentially escape room philosophy and technology. But at the moment, it's sort of like COVID just happened. We've been rebuilding the community, and this was our attempt to take a look at, could we do a bit more of that again, and for the most part, it worked.
We had intended to actually have the participants, well, one of the participants do like a Kool-Aid man thing through the collapsible wall, but we just ran out of space in the end. You would have ended up in the quicksand if you did that. So we had to sort of do things on the fly, and that's often with these kinds of things. You just literally have to. We had big plans going into it about where we wanted to do it up in the bush and use the a different area of the site, but then without the opportunity to sort of go and set it up beforehand, we would have been running cables and setting things up in the middle of the bush in the dark, and it would have been it was a very much a last minute decision, like literally about 45 minutes before it happened. We decided to move it to a different location.
Yeah, we pretty much realized we didn't have long enough extension leads, because while all of our lights are wireless, the desk that controls them is not.
Yeah. And they do run out of range at some point.
Yeah, and the trees interference and stuff. So you probably saw at the end of the dungeon, I was sitting at a desk trying to make all the things happen, and accidentally pressing buttons too early.
I love you.
I think one of the.
Oh man, when I hit it and the laughter started, I panicked so bad, but thankfully got that to stop quick. But man,
I think one of the hardest things was the Minotaur costume. The feat that I was wearing for the Minotaur costume, I was basically on point.
I was scared you were going to stack it.
And with it's Mally, I was basically on point on like wooden things while carrying a rather heavy wooden shield and a massive axe, and wearing a mask that did not have eye holes in the right places, so I was largely blind. And because of delays in setup and getting people to where they needed to be, I ended up in position ready to go for about 15-20 minutes. And my calves and my toes were already massively in pain. So Millie ended up standing behind me and bending her knees to make a chair out of her body for me to sit on. Because getting down off of those things was really hard once I was up on them. And my legs were starting to shake at one point. But
for the sweating and the heat.
Oh, the sweating! It was rather warm, and that mask has like basically bedding insulation in the nose, so I was basically breathing into like a thick blanket. But yeah, I thought it was really fun, and it was actually an unintended thing that we didn't realize until it happened, is that when we put one of those bar lights directly in front of where I was standing,
Z8 strip.
Yeah, everybody coming into the dungeon couldn't see beyond that light just because of the way that the human eye works in darkness. So I was literally standing there in full Minotaur costume on stilts watching everybody come in, and I could have been almost within arm's reach to touch them, and they would not have been able to see me until I stepped through that light, which was interesting. And then I had to fight a bunch of people completely blind, much like what happened at the trivia night the other night. So I had practice.
It's destiny.
Yeah.
So those lights, I took. If for those who aren't aware or somehow didn't pick up on this throughout the weekend, I am a lighting designer. Those are the lights that I play with at work all the time, and I took a lot of, not inspiration, but took a lot of my theatrical lighting knowledge into this. So even just the blues on like 50% or whatever it was, that is very much a theatrical thing for especially more amateur level productions, because professionals will just move in black because they don't want to break the illusion of like, yeah, they're just moving on and off stage between scenes. But for more amateur productions or productions with like kids and stuff, they'll have just like this very low blue for the actors to run around and do scene changes and everything. And so that like it's all coming from like theatrical lighting background, and like the ideally it would have been just like pitch black, but for safety reasons you can't do that. So what do you do when you can't do pitch black? You do very low blue. And with the like the blinders, effectively, the light strips acting as blinders, which are exactly what it sounds like. They blind the audience. You see it a lot at concerts and stuff, going psh, 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 like on big like beats or whatever, using all that to kind of build the effect of like, sure, having these clearly modern technology light strips isn't particularly immersive, but that for me was far outweighed by like the way that you can use lighting to set a mood, because even the fact that it's blue and not like yellow or white or anything like that is like, it all goes into this like whole effect of like setting this emotional tone. And then just like obviously the technical side of like making the fire flicker and all of that stuff. God, that was complicated. I had to like I had to make the dimmer setting of each light randomly strobe, slow that right down, set it so that it wasn't going between 0 and 100 and like 50 to 80%, so that it was more like a candle flicker, and then also have it flickering between like red and orange at the same time. It was like I had to change like 8 different settings just for this one effect.
But it worked.
But it worked, and you guys all seemed like very impressed by it. I would have liked to, if I had more time to program, because I programmed it all the night before. If I had more time to program, I would have liked to set it up as a properly cued thing. Because what I had was just like this effect on this fader, that effect on that fader, and you just go, all right, fire time, zhup, zhup. But what I would have liked to have done was like set it up so it was a proper cue, so that you press like go and then it happens, and then go and then it happens. Because then I could have had the fire essentially. I think, no, it's not flipped for you guys because it's my stream. Essentially having it run from like left to right, of like the fire starts here and then goes whoosh along the pathway. So that's something I would have liked to have done, but didn't have time to between everything else I was doing. Sorry, I'm going to stop rambling about lights now.
It's all good. Hashtag prismaticevents.com for your light and audio and styling needs.
Give us
From
money.
weddings to live theatre. Just as an aside thing, I was also going to say that, yeah, you would be, well, you might not be surprised, but I like to think you'd be surprised at how many things we have considered putting into the game or have been recommended to us to add into the game, that the inclusion or not inclusion of it really just boils down to safety. And our safety standards compared to like certain sports are actually insanely high. As much as you might, cop a foam sword to the face, I mean, you're not taking like a hockey puck at like 60 kilometers straight to the face. And we try to avoid anything that's going to leave a bruise, even comparable to paintball. There are other games that aren't like that, but the expectation of ours nowadays is that it is as safe as humanly possible. So even just things down to like how dark and moody we make a scene boils down to like, our concept of safety. So if you ever wonder, like, oh, why wasn't that more action-packed or more bleak, or why weren't they like throwing actual rocks at us as we ran past? Like, that's why.
We want you guys to be safe.
Which is why we cancelled game today.
So why we cancelled game?
Because we prioritize your guys' safety.
Yeah, we try to make it a point that we're a very, very safe game. I mean, we allow minors to come to games, so we have certain standards we have to set ourselves by. And the Dragon's Lair was like 100% within those parameters. And so right from the start, when Addie and I were figuring out how on earth we were going to do the lights, it was like we have to have blue lights in there. And while it would be cool to have blinding effects and stuff, especially with the Minotaur, we knew for a fact we had to have the entire thing lit up in some way just to make sure people would be safe. And then even down to the swinging blades, the traps, everything was foam, everything was safe. And then even if you listen to the voiceover, even the way that we're describing how to duck to get out of the dragon flame, it's like if you can't go down, if because of some issue you have outside of your character, that you have a reason you can't duck down, you can't get on the ground, put your hands on your head. And that's just us trying to make it accessible and safe for everyone, because I for sure can't just drop to the ground and get up again and keep going. And I know there's plenty of other people in similar situations to me. Arthritis is a bitch. And everything about how we run these games is in a way that we can make it as accessible as possible while also making it as fun as possible and as safe as possible, which means sometimes we can't get to do the super fun things, but we try.
Yeah. That reminds me, two things. One thing, as far as all that, is we also sometimes consider the emotional safety because, and that's why the scene was a buy-in as far as like, and that's also why like the original concept was to make the buy-in you find out when you get there, but given that people get so attached to their characters and people get so upset when things happen to them sometimes, we that's why there was like weeks upon weeks upon weeks of warning and remember guys, this is a buy-in, and we also had
You
to
could die.
and also the remember guys, not everyone, like not 80 people are going to be able to engage in this one thing. Please taper your expectations. Like the reason it felt so over the top and pedantic is because if even one person ends up having a panic attack or ends up having a breakdown because they weren't included,
That's still a report I have to file and write. No, I'm kidding. It's not about the paperwork.
It's still a complaint email. It's still us feeling bad because we're not trying to hurt people. It's just like, we're trying to run a game that is both in many ways realistic, but also we do have to cater to the mental health of everybody involved, and also just sometimes the expectations, because a person might not be, having a terrible day until this one thing happens that happened in a way they weren't expecting, and all of a sudden, like, it throws out the rest of their mood for the whole day. And it's like, there's a lot of psychology that goes behind our choices. And as for the physical side of the safety, my biggest example when people ask like, stuff that you don't do anymore for safety, Rue wrestling is one of the things that I missed, because way back our early weekenders at Carry On, there was a raised log, and the idea of Rue wrestling is that Rue will wrestle on their rafts in the swamp, and that they will like do a thing where they put like foot to foot, hand clasped to hand, and then it's the first person to be thrown from the raft without like raising your foot or losing the grip. And we were replicating that on a log that was like 30 centimeters above the ground. But the problem is, if a person lands the wrong way on their ankle, they've got a broken ankle. If they land like, and they trip and they fall and they hit their head on the ground, then again, that's a complaint email waiting to happen. So at this stage, that game doesn't exist in that form. And if it did exist, it would be on the ground, and honestly less exciting than it sounds like it is in the law. But that's because legal blah blah blah. So
and I've noticed a lot of not I've noticed a lot of, but every now and then I see like a comment being like, oh man, I like that was the Dragon's Den. I was expecting that to be like way more hardcore than it was. I was expecting everyone to die because of like how much emphasis the admins put on how much you could die from doing this. And yeah, it was all to for player safety and for as Chris says, to curb the complaint emails. No, I'm kidding. No, it was all for player safety, because we knew that if we didn't put that stress on and someone, got involved and was like, yeah, this is going to be a fun time, and then this character that they've put a lot of investment into does die, and they go, oh, Sard, I wasn't actually ready for this to happen, then that sucks. And it's also like, even just from a financial perspective of like having to buy an entirely new kit or whatever for a new character, like it's a character is an emotional and a financial and time, what's the word, time investment.
Temporal.
Yes, temporal investment. So we really, it wasn't as intense as some of you may have been led to believe by our constant postings, but it's so that you guys are like as fully informed as you can be without spoilers of like what could happen here.
Yeah, if it gets to a point where the mood of the community shifts and that people are more keen for that sort of stuff to pop up at random, then yeah, we would absolutely do it. Or if we set the standard right from the start, like after the fall does, that at any second your character could die, then great. You signed up for it. You know exactly what is going to happen. But yeah, again, because of the cost investment and everything that Addy was saying, it's as the community sits right now, too many people would be upset if we just suddenly started dropping deaths left, right, and center. So, yeah.
Because that is something we stress, that permadeath is rare in our games, that it is not something that happens often. We should do another question. We've been talking about this one for like 20 minutes.
I'm going to duck away from Helena's questions because you gave us a lot, Helena.
God damn it, Helena.
I'll come back to him if we get the time. So Des has asked, the benevolent magic spells, what was the inspiration to those spells and your thoughts on them?
Oh boy, that was very many meetings.
Sorry, say again. I was drinking my tea and my brain turned off.
Benevolent spells.
The benevolent magic spells, what was the inspiration to those spells and your thoughts on them? That was like 2 years worth of every single meeting, us talking
discussing
in
them
circles around each other,
and
then coming to no conclusions.
Yeah, like all of the spells that
we
came up with, all the spells we came up with, like we had like solid vibes, but vibes aren't solid rules. So it most of that time was spent just hashing out how they'd actually function, what the actual mechanics would be, trying not to make them too OP or otherwise, or too far the opposite direction, just useless and a waste of a spell slot basically. So a lot of that time was like, and because we were discussing it during COVID as well, that also pushed the time out because, one of the things in consideration was, well, we haven't even had like 6 months worth of games for these last rule set to be play tested to see what needs happening there. Like we still haven't fully play tested the rules that we released at the beginning of this year, so we can't, we don't really want to introduce even more stuff into the mix until we know that what we've got here is solid, and so on and so forth. Mealy, you have your hands.
Yeah, I was going to say, at their core, the benevolent spells, when we came into it, were very selfless. Like, none of them affect you. They're all about helping other people.
Yeah.
And at their core, that was our goal when we were designing them, that they were meant to be like to help other people. Because if you look at the malevolent spells, they're all very selfless with Drain Life and Bind, and it's all
selfish.
And what can someone else do for me, or what can I get out of this? But that's what the benevolent spells, they were really aimed at. Pushing that selfless to the point where we considered moving Dispel into a benevolent spell, but ultimately decided not to.
It's a very good neutral spell.
Yeah, mostly for lore reasons, I believe, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it was tempered by the idea that originally magic was just magic, and then magic that's drawn from ruin, so ruinous magic. And then I won't cut off the rest of your point, but there was the idea that even among the items list that we have, the like things like the Ring of the Martyr and all the other like goody two shoes abilities, or like Staff of Healing. do not affect the person carrying them. So as you say, it's an outward expression of power, whereas things like vampire gauntlets mean that sure, that healer doesn't heal as many times in a fight, like one less time, but that healer can keep themselves up and healing more often, you know? So but you know, despite the fact that the original idea was that there are just the two choices and one of them is seemingly powerful, but at the expenditure of like you're not supporting your allies as much. People wanted to sort of force that, you know, to a third option of, well, how about we make, you know, sorcerers in a way that like divine healers are like very much buffing allies, having wizards that were more about buffing allies. Because at the time, really, the only buff we had was mage armor that you could just go, here's a hit point, buddy.
um, yeah, like on that point, a lot of I just want to add that like a lot of the discussion that went into the benevolent spells was how to make it work within the law. Like that was probably like the most like going around in circles conversation we had over and over and over again of like, but that's not like historically like in the law that's not how magic works, but also like we really wanted to push this idea of having benevolent spells because the kind of core inspiration of it, to go back to the that part of the question, the core inspiration of it was just like we wanted to give players who wanted to play a good guy more options, because the way that it was essentially if you wanted to play a bad guy, you had you had more choices, you had more abilities, you had more potential. Like it seemed like it felt like the game mechanics were rewarding people who wanted to play a bad guy. So it just came from like wanting to kind of balance that out a bit and give the good guys some like these are some special things just for you as well. Because lore-wise, there are downsides to being a ruinous mage. You get all gooped up and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, those are just roleplay effects that not everyone really leans into. So basically, just game balance was the main inspiration there.
You first, Amelia.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the benevolent spells, I know we discussed like where they came from, and we can't stress this enough that benevolent spells aren't related to the gods at all or the holds. They are still magic. It is still like from magic, and I believe lore-wise when we're discussing this, it's just like a closer form of high elf magic, like closer to it, I believe, Chris.
It was, yeah, that was going to be my point, is that we did toss up the idea of D&D in later editions has changed to say that like clerics don't now have prayers, they have spells, you know, and everything is just a spell and it's the source of energy that you're drawing on, whether it's the weave or whether it's whatever. And yeah, we did talk about it being deific, and it didn't feel right given our setting, given the way we've explained things. And then we did toy with it being high magic, but then it says that high magic, only a high elf is capable of doing it. So then what we ended up falling onto was the idea of rue magic is often described as being quite benevolent and illusory and sort of more about preserving what's left of their realm as opposed to like fireballs and death and plagues and things, and about healing people because they also had like the shivering gloom inflicted on them and stuff. So yeah, it became more of the idea of spellcasters who are actively trying not necessarily mimic elves, but they are choosing not to use magic the way that an elf would think a human would. So like elves would think, oh, humans don't do anything to preserve things, they just destroy stuff. But these are wizards who could have sort of prove that wrong. Yeah.
Next question.
All right, let's move on. What do Cryptari look like?
Ooh, that's fun.
Have you seen the old Hellboy 2 with Ron Perlman? And there's the angel that appears in that with the mask covered in eyes, and it's got the black four wings, and it's quite creepy. It looks like
see if I can bring up an
wings.
image of it.
Yeah, that, but covered in like set hourglasses and keys in my brain. Yeah. And the whole thing is like always appearing like just out of the corner of your eye, standing in like a darkened doorway or stuff. Like they're eerie as hell.
That's a great one, isn't it?
Sorry.
I don't know things to do with the gods.
yeah,
I'm trying to remember what they
Yeah,
are.
Celestials of Kree.
Yeah, okay,
So,
yeah.
yeah. Because Kree is the only god that actually makes his hold basically a fortress in the middle of Nether and is like desperately trying to like hold souls there so they don't get eaten by demons. The souls that aren't claimed by like other gods. Yeah, his angels, if you will, are still aspects of like the inevitability of like death and moving on and like stepping through the doorway into the next realm and all that. So yeah, they're eerie, even if they're not, evil. But then as well, most things about our gods, like Narayan Narod, also their celestials are mer. So any sort of like genuine mermaid in our setting is a basically a fishy angel.
Fishy.
Terrible way to put it, but the thing is that much like merfolk in our real world, the original fictional idea of them is that they are like they will tempt sailors to their death if you're not careful, if you don't like put a drop of blood in the sea before you sail and stuff like that. Like because Narayan and the Rord are very fickle, their celestials are very fickle.
Okay, I'm just quickly gonna visually transition to Angel of Death. Ooh, spooky. And
I
back
think the
again.
thing also to remember when it comes to stuff like celestials and demons, there is the imagery that we love to use for them, but there is also the very human aspect of we have to make these costumes. So often, like, we might have a celestial of Fundun who appeared like 5 years ago, under a very different admin team. And then if we wanted to do a Celestial of Fundun now, I actually don't know if we've ever had a Celestial of Fundun at game. I can't remember one. But if we did one now, compared to say 5 years ago, well, we'd probably take a different approach because there's only like 2 members of the admin team who are still admins 5 years ago. So it's a different approach, different ideas, different visualizations of what we think. And also then when we start making the costume, what does it actually look like in the end? So I absolutely adored Leo and Tax's Celestial costumes for the Mer at the October weekend of last year, but that was completely different, I think, to how any of us would have visualized Mer, but it still worked really perfectly. They did an amazing job on those costumes, and honestly, I am so impressed. I'm incredibly talented. But they still perfectly were Mer, despite I don't think any of us would have had that visualization, that idea in creating Celestials
Don't
like
you
that.
just love player creativity?
We love it when players make cool things. We love it. We love it so much, honestly.
We'll get more into that with next year, based on some discussions we need to have as a team about including more essentially player like physical creativity as far as like building things, because there's a lot of very creative people out there who maybe don't actually, sorry to interrupt, Amelia, but one big thing that struck me about some images that came out of Sawcraft this year was that given they've got a Warhammer based setting now, there was a rat ogre and there were lots of siege engines and things of that nature. And that is very cool and impressive, but that's not necessarily the organizers of Sawcraft setting that up. That's the players. They just what they bring to the game makes the game and makes it look bigger, better, brighter, more entertaining. And I know there's a lot of our players who do similar things, like the Iron Legion recently, like expanding the area around Tavern Town to include more like seats and chairs and things to give it that like outdoorsy tavern feel. In the past, we've had people who've built monsters, like obviously what Tax and Leo did. We've also had people build like war machines, like our Raven Company guys do, and whole like fortresses, like Rob often does, or at least like the sort of
Barricades.
barricades and things. So yeah, we want to sort of make people feel more like that is a possibility, because even just down to the idea of people bringing like a deck of cards and just gambling, like instead of standing around waiting for an objective, like that sort of thing makes the world feel more real. And yeah, so as much as transport's always going to be an issue, we do want to have more critters and monsters and things. We just can't allow them for every single game, otherwise they become a little bit like Oh, yeah, it's a Saturday again, is it? Oh, I guess the Minotaur's out, you know.
Oh, she's being
Monster
a
of the
menace.
week.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my dog was just yelling outside. She's being a
Yeah.
menace.
I'll continue going on questions. This is are shifter species endemic to certain areas, like less likely to see a bear shifter in the jungle of claws, etc.?
Yeah.
Yes, kind of.
Makes sense. I mean, I never really imagined that you would have like a polar bear shifter in the jungle of claws, for example. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like Joel and I have had really good chats about how a hyena shifter makes more sense to do with frail and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You got to imagine the region the Wizard Kings were operating in and doing their experiments in and creating shifters in.
Family trees.
They would be taking the animals from the region they're in. So, say if you're in the middle of the desert, you're not really going to have wolves
exactly.
around, but you might have a convenient, I don't know, lion.
Wait,
I don't know.
Corellius is a shifter?
I never said that.
They were just
Oh,
shifting
just-
stuff. That's completely unrelated. But yeah, the other thing
I
is
never
that
said which Joel.
the other thing is that in our like area, because adventurers all become buddy buddies and they sort of overlook some of the horrors that the rest of the world would. Like the only nation in the setting that is open to having like shifters living among them at all is Vilkland. And the only reason the Vilks are like this is because there was a war a while back with creatures where the like shifters were instrumental in fighting back, but not like alongside their human companions. Like the shifters went off into the wilderness and fought and killed and then came back all bloodied and battered and were like, there's the problem fixed. And the Vilks were like, that's cool. You can stick around so long as you either like lock yourself in a cave with like a metal door or like when the blood moon goes full, like you run like so far away that you can't smell us anymore and come back and kill all of us because they're not like it's not like they just because they accept them the shifters become magically like a good thing or the curse is lifted. So because most people hate them and like are terrified of them, they would kill them the second they know they exist. So the reason that you wouldn't find something like a polar bear shifter in the jungle of claws is because a polar bear shifter has a much harder time hunting, surviving, and hiding in that environment. So when they do shift, anyone who's hunting for them, like on the blood moon, would just find them and just kill them. They wouldn't last. Whereas
Also,
like
you'd
yeah.
have forced immigration as your shifted form. Like
Two.
I imagine like you'd shift, and if you're a polar bear and you're in the middle of the desert, you're gonna get out of there. You're gonna run. You're gonna go to the coldest place you can. So when you wake up after the blood moon, which can last several days in some instances, when you wake up after the blood moon, shifters are very fast. You could be on the opposite side of the continent.
And also
like
there are exceptions, like because every adventurer is an exception to the rule in some cases, and that's why even though like the vast majority of shifters in the setting would be wolves, because that's just the stock standard werewolf trope, and because the vast majority of them that aren't being hunted to extinction are basically in Vilkland, and that's wolves and bears and stuff. You've also still just got to remember that like in our player base, like there's a whole bunch of random weird shifter creatures. They're all predators still. There's no like sheep shifters or anything, but like we have like bird-based shifters and stuff that like the average wizard king wouldn't have necessarily created, and you know where they come from, why they're all in the weft instead of elsewhere. Like it's yeah, there are exceptions, but if you're talking about the general law, again, remember that if you say like, oh yeah, I was raised as a I don't know what's a good one, like a crocodile shifter in Arcos, and like yeah, everyone in the town knew about it and they didn't care. Like that's most people who know the setting are gonna call bullshit on that, or they're gonna call you crazy, or when you do turn into a crocodile, they're gonna say, no, you probably killed everyone in that village, and that's why you're here in hiding.
Birdie
Yeah.
says normalize hating shifters and undead. And yes, please,
Yes.
please.
Yes.
I know you're half joking, but please.
That
It's
in
about hating
Candy
people.
and orcs, and in some cases elves. In fact, most cases, Arcos would hate elves.
And
Yeah.
you know,
Seven elves ruined everything.
and Ashbourne.
What?
Yes,
No, why would you
all
hate
of you,
Ashbourne? That's
please
crazy.
hate Ashbourne. Please.
Ashbourne are great.
You'll have
Ashbourne are
bring in-
dragons are all evil. There are no exceptions.
you'll
No,
have been
serious, though,
gaslighting
please
me
hate Ashbourne.
into thinking that Muz is just like off their nut for no reason because like a dragon killed their mum or something for hating Ashbourne, and it's like, no, you guys are wrong. You guys are insane. Ah!
We just need a little dollop of speciesism, is all I'm saying.
Please, dragons are awful, Ashbourne are awful, please.
Oh, look,
Please,
when
guys.
When
We're trying to run a plot based on this, please.
when I first started playing Chelik, and some of the undead characters came up to me and were like, "Hey, I want to have a conversation with you," and I moved someone and I was just like, "I just want to forewarn you, my character hates you, and it is entirely racist because you are undead. You are not going to get good responses. I just want you to be aware beforehand. I'm gonna be a dick to you."
I'm not a dick in character, I swear. Or not a dick out of character.
But one fun thing that I've had, having played a shifter for many, many, many years, is that my shifter is a Vilklander and he is a Wolfen, and a lot of people that have come at me and kind of said, "Oh, your shifters ran around and killed everyone last game when it was a blood moon," and I was and I've just said to so many people, back at home the Wolfen are kind of revered because everybody knows that when the blood moon rises, you go inside and you barricade your door, and the Wolfen run around in the forest and kill all of the orcs and the trolls and the bandits and everything that's hiding in the woods waiting to make your day really bad when you next step out of your house. And then they transform back into their human forms, whatever, and they come back into the society and everyone says, "Thanks guys, great job." But for some reason, in the Vale, you all just go about your business like nothing's different, and it's not my fault if you want to get killed. Of course, the other thing is that my character is not a reliable narrator in that circumstance. I will make that argument to your face in character, but if you want to talk to me out of character, that argument doesn't necessarily stand up.
Are you
and
saying
this is
that?
something that I wanted to point out, is that it's okay for your character to believe something that is objectively not true and can make that argument over and over again and swear blind that it is true. But when you play a different character, you will make the exact opposite argument and believe that just as hard as your other character does. So I think there's a lot of things that I've come across that I've found that players believe because of conversations they've had with characters, and that's not necessarily the case. If you've ever had a conversation with Chelik about the Naga, you're literally talking to the representative of demons about the Naga. He's only going to say good things about them. But if I was playing the Sentinel, for example, I will make exactly the opposite argument over and over and over again. And yeah, we'll take that belief to my character's death. So yeah, I just wanted to encourage people that it's okay to hate people. It's not okay to hate people. It's okay to hate characters because of that character's race or character's race's background or the things that they've done in character. But this is where we've done a lot of work over the last little while about bleed, differentiating between the character and the person is very important. And also, as I was just kind of saying about the arguments that I've made as Canis about what he believes shifters are and what the Vilklanders believe shifters are, understanding the law of the world that you're inhabiting is, I mean, obviously it's very hard when you're first starting because you will have a lot of things in your head from other mythologies, but trying to actually get into your mind the understanding of what Scy'kadia is, which is where we had one of the people at the Weekender who was a part of the debate made the point and said that dragons don't just turn into people and take on human forms, and most of the people there laughed and started jeering and saying, "Oh yeah, of course they do," and the admins are all sitting there going, "Where? No, they don't. Where do you get this information
Look
from?"
at our law, please.
It has never ever happened in Scy'kadia lore before. No dragon has ever turned into human form, but we realized that most of the player base believes that this is something that just happens all the time, and we kind of realized, okay, so we need to address this issue because there are a bunch of things that people have carried over from Dungeons and Dragons or other different mythologies.
The Witcher
I'm gonna stop
recently.
talking and let Chris say what he's saying.
Oh no, I was just going to put in that The Witcher recently did it too. A bunch of very benevolent dragons who took on human form, and anyone who's watched that one episode and then comes to our games, who comes in and says, "Oh, I'm an Ashborn. I have not read what an Ashborn is. I just heard it's a cool thing. You can worship dragons. My dragon is really nice and it protects my village." And that can cause issues down the line for the poor player, because when we have a plot point where people are hunting dragon worshippers and whatnot, they feel targeted and upset, but it's because our lore is not The Witcher. Our lore is, arguably there are influences because we know people want to wear their Witcher cosplay, and please, if you do, change it up enough that we know you're not just basically but yeah.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing that when we create big bad evil villains, this isn't D&D. There can be a race that is purely evil, and that is dragons in our setting. And when people come to you and say things like this dragon turned into a person, your character should either A, laugh it off, or go, how did that happen? That's not meant to happen. Those are the two appropriate responses to being told that. And it's the same sort of thing, like, when it comes to... I'm losing my mind over Bartholomew just being there in my line of sight. Like, I'll pat him. But it's that sort of thing with a lot of what goes on within our games. It shouldn't just be, oh, I accept that, or yeah, I saw that in this other popular piece of media, so that's of course how it works. No, you got to start questioning things, because if it's not in our wiki, if it's not explained in our wiki, then there's something going on.
You just reminded me of something about choices that we make when it comes to including monsters and particularly playable races, because we don't have lizard folk or things like that you would consider in D&D expanded races. They're not in the core book. Most of our species would be found in the core book, or at least our version of Elementary back in 4th ed, or God, what are we up to with D&D now? 5th, 6th?
Fifth.
But I remember they had Ganassi as well, so our Elementary are based on that, and there's no basic fairy creature that you can play in, apart from maybe gnomes at the most in basic D&D, but we added pixies because players just kept rocking up wearing wings without asking whether or not they could, so we just went, what if you're that adamant to wear wings, then we will write in a chunk of lore about how they have to be big, and all that basically came about from players costuming choices without asking what was available for play. But as far as adding new things, if people come in and say we want to play Skaven, we want to play gnolls, we want to play all this kind of stuff, sometimes we like to keep the more openly bestial races that look a bit like shifters that never become human. We want to keep them for monsters down the track, because the costume is unsafe in summer because of overheating and stuff like that. Your visibility is crap if you're going all out, if you're not just putting some whiskers on and calling yourself a rat folk. That would also just confuse people. There's a lot of...
on our end, because we are just humans with limited abilities and limited wallets. Often our small monsters will be those kind of human monster hybrids, because that is what we are able to do.
Yeah. And from a mechanical standpoint, I was having a conversation with someone recently about in fact, several people about this point. The reason that we won't, for example, add in multiple extra species every year, or the reason that we won't add in a particular god has 5-6 different variations of its name, is because when we're going to write an effect or a relic or a mechanic that says only X being is affected by this, or only X deity allows you to do this, if you have 8 options then to choose from, then you are more likely to be affected by in-game effects and get something out of it. If you're one of 50 choosable species, or like we just let you make up your own at random, then like if you say like, oh yeah, I'm a what am I, like a troglodyte crab person because I just decided to be. How long is it going to take for us to decide to write for you the one troglodyte crab person? Oh yeah, there's a relic specifically for troglodyte crab people, because that's in the end that's just us handing you a free thing, as opposed to making it a puzzle, a thing that you earn. If we write, this affects elves, 30 people in the game might benefit from that, and so we get more value out of it. You get more value out of it. It trades hands and it goes back and forth, and like it's yeah, there's a mechanical and again a psychological and also a your safety consideration in pretty much everything that we omit. And I'm gonna go grab a coffee.
Have fun. Good luck. Don't die.
Millie, you want to go?
What to do?
Oh, I can't hear you.
Millie, you're muted. You've
You're
muted
muted.
yourself, honey.
Or I was eating chips. For the same reason that we don't particularly allow new races per se, the same reason why we encourage players to not make up new deities. If you're the only follower of your deity in the West, there's less likelihood that we're going to write a plot or a cool relic that's going to affect your deity. We typically wait to like a critical mass of like 3 to 5 players following a particular deity before we will do something with it. Otherwise, it's really not worth our time. So, if you have a cool idea about a deity, maybe write a story. There are lots to choose from in our setting already. Maybe have a look at those and see if one of those aligns with your character before deciding to run the route of, oh, hey, I follow a great sun turtle in the sky.
Yeah, quite often when people want to write new things or have a deity that fits their specific thing, if you actually just look at the lore, most of the time what you want already exists. You just need to find it and actually make your character fit the lore rather than the lore fit your character. Becky has...
Yeah, just a bit of an example of this, and I might sound like a bit of a dick, but I played Healer of the Kraken for many years. I think 4 years, I think, and in that time, I got one plot. I got one Kraken plot, and I thought that was amazing. And that was a plot I paid for at an admin auction, and I thought that was incredibly amazing of the admins to have done, because I was worshipping a lesser deity. And so it was a sort of understood thing that I had chosen to play a character who worshipped a lesser deity, and the implication of that meant that I wasn't really going to get much. I had to create stories for myself, and that meant I got to do some awesome stuff, especially conflict with the Naga worshippers and the god worshippers. I had so much fun with that over the years, because I created the conflict for myself. But when it came to admin created plots, I got the one thing where I summoned the Kraken on top of the hill, and the Kraken had like 10 worshippers or something at its peak. But that was what we expected, and I think there was a major shift. We had a lot of changeover in the player base, but coming out of COVID, a lot of people came up with their lesser deities. But I even look back now and I go, with the Kraken, we probably could have just gone with Nerod or with what's the Zalil, and either of those we could have worked out that we were worshipping a lesser demon of them or something like that, or a greater celestial of Nerod, that sort of thing. And that's me looking back now from the admin perspective. But back when I was playing this Kraken priestess, at the time it was like, yes, I worship a lesser deity. I'm not supposed to get things. And I think, unfortunately, we've had this shift in this idea where people assume lesser deities will get things, and it's like, well, actually, we will try where we can, but they're not our priorities, because that's only a small section of the player base that's affected, whereas we want to encourage people to join Light Camp, we want to encourage people to join Shadow. Encouraging these lesser deities and lesser deity quests means we're encouraging a bunch of people who are flitting around going anywhere. But if we have Leander quests, if we have Balroth quests, that drives people towards Light Camp. If we have Trakor and all that stuff quests, it drives people towards Shadow, which is our goal. Those are meant to be the big scary camps. That's how the game design is supposed to work. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's not what happens, but our
And-
game, in a way, centers around the gods and the Naga, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to focus on lesser deities like the Kraken, and I don't remember any of the others because they weren't relevant to me. But it doesn't matter to the overall plot to focus on them, if that makes sense.
I know people got their fingers up. Can I just put a quick caveat on that just to clarify for people listening that doesn't mean that we're discouraging people from serving gods that they want to serve or playing characters that they want to play. You are still absolutely welcome to do that, but part of doing that is you take that on knowing that the admin team does not have time to put in intricate quests for every single player's personal deity. We are people who have families and full-time jobs, and
That was going to be mine.
we do this as a hobby, and we can't commit to the level of time that it would take to write individual plots for 110 people. Yeah.
So, like, lore-wise, the lesser deities wouldn't necessarily have the power to be constantly looking at every one of their followers all at once. So they would only really sort of focus on a particular region or area or group of players if there was a high enough concentration, which is why do we say if we get like 3 to 5 in an area at a game and they're there for a few games in a row, we might throw them a quest, which may lead to like a temporary buff or boon or something on those lines if they're able to complete that quest. But as the others said, writing that takes time and effort away from other stuff that we'd be necessarily doing. And so we wouldn't necessarily do it unless there are quite a number of followers of that deity.
And we might also write that objective for what amounts to one person, and then that person just doesn't show up for 6 weeks. And that it takes, again, like it could take a lot of our time. We've built props, we've designed puzzles, and it just doesn't, So again, for us, it's not that we're saying, as Nathan said, don't make up your own deity, but do it for your own sense of like, well, I don't really click with the others, and I don't really need to have resurrection as an ability, so that's fine. And you can just be a neutral healer, but again, the game is based around choice. The choice between back to the idea of the benevolent spells before they were a thing. While it seems from an outside perspective that, okay, yes, of the 15 spells, evil sorcerers have access to an extra 5, that's fine. But if you're taking all the evil spells, you're not getting your freeze, you're not getting your damage, you're not getting your mage armor. Like, it seems like there's more options, and there's more options, but they aren't, like, you might not necessarily want them. It's just there's an extra choice if you choose to be aligned with a particular thing. And so, yeah, it's again, it's sort of like the psychology is intentional of having to make that choice between, am I serving a deity that is like across the world, and it definitely has its like profit here, and the profit is directly saying, we have a job to do, we've got a war to fight, your god is watching you, go do your thing? Or are you, like, even in the case of the Kraken, while we've had a lot of Kraken worshippers, the Kraken is a deity of a bunch of islands that are like months of travel away, and it's not even necessarily a global. Yeah, it's not even a global deity. It's literally a magical monster. Whether you
They're
choose to believe
half
it's
a continent away from the Weft.
Yeah, so like it genuinely, it would actually make more sense for us to not have Kraken healers allowed in the game, because how's it doing its thing? But we just assume it's like, the waterways around here have its energy filtering to its followers, or they've got, their prayers draw its attention to them temporarily.
They drank the squid ink.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Nice.
and, what was it? There was a thing. Yeah, there's also just just a caveat to all this. There is a misconception that I find when I talk to some players, that we do actually go out of our way to give like individuals plot all the time. I just want to say, for the record, that a lot of the current plots that revolve around certain individuals currently in game are basically the players themselves have put themselves in that position. And in a lot of cases, there are players that, are constantly referred to as like, the local celebrity or the local champion or the person that everyone just pushes to the front. And that's the thing. That person might just have the kind of personality where the players around them are constantly like, there's a problem, let's go fetch so and so, and they'll solve it. And that's, it's a shame for that happens as often as it does, but that really doesn't that's not us putting the objective in for that person. It's their friends just, they fall back on old habits, and they forget that maybe it's someone else's turn, or maybe a new player has applicable skills and maybe they should be pushed forward first. And so, yeah, when it comes down to the idea of like already without us putting objectives in for the singular people, when those singular people are constantly getting the limelight, there's sometimes a little bit of background, like people getting salty about it because, oh, why aren't I in the spotlight? And, we do our best to try and curb that. But if we then actively go out of our way to give one person with one special backstory a ton of puzzles and plot, and occasionally we'll do it if we see the player hasn't had a lot of limelight. We'll do it because we're trying to be generous and we're trying to help out where we can. And that's assuming we notice it too, because we're 6 people dealing with like 110 people. It's we might not notice because unfortunately, like again, like you might not even come and tell us. Like you might be off doing things and we just don't see it, and we are sorry for that. But
ultimately, we can only look at the big picture because there are only so many of us and so many of you. Also, everyone keep an eye on Hodge's background because Lynn's coming soon.
Cool.
Lynn coming.
And yes, if we actively go out of our way to prop a particular person up and we don't do it in the right way, other people who feel a bit neglected will suddenly have a problem with what's going on. And it's, as I say, it's a work in progress as far as managing. Again, it's not just a sport. It's some people have like an alternate life in this, and we are very like conscious that we need to make sure that it doesn't like cause real problems to their real psyche. So yeah,
we should do another question. Oh, sorry, Hodge.
No, the other thing that I think is worth mentioning in as far as that is concerned is understanding the nature of the game, in that Scy'kadia is an open world free form LARP. So we put objectives into the game, but how you complete those objectives and who completes those objectives is entirely up to the player base. We can put a story into the game, but there is no railroads there for you to follow. And what that means sometimes is that we might put an objective into a game with a particular group or a particular player in mind for that objective, but if those players don't pick up on it, or there is always the possibility that they might be 3/4 of the way through an objective and just happen to run into another group of people who butcher them all, take their stuff, and then work out the objective themselves and go and complete that, and it creates an entirely different story out of what you had originally intended, which is where writing objectives for this kind of game, you can't have too much of a clear end goal in mind. There needs to be 1,000 different possible outcomes. And that's where sometimes writing stories for a specific person is literally impossible. Also, something that we've kind of discussed a bit recently is the nature of, there's an understanding that a lot of people have of, particularly being a freeform open world LARP, that theatre sports rules apply. Theatre sports is a great training ground for this kind of thing because you are learning
yes, and
well, I was going to say the what's the word when you make stuff up as you go? Ad-libbing.
Improvise.
Improvisation. Yes, improv acting essentially is a big part of LARP. And in theatre sports, when people start, you do teach them the basic principles of yes and we do try and yes and people a lot of the time, but that understanding, it's Lynn and a cat.
El gato.
Hey, oh, purse.
Alan.
That understanding of LARP as a theatre sport and expecting people to yes and you all the time, because we are also a combat LARP, and combat does not need to be announced. It doesn't need to even have a reason other than I don't like your face. So no, but is also a perfectly viable thing, because somebody might say, hey, I would like you to come for a walk with me. And the person can say, no, I want to chop your legs off. And that creates a different story. Now, the story was, I'm going to get this person to come for a walk with me. But now the story is, this person's trying to kill me and I need to run away or I need to fight them. And then you have a friend who saw that person cut your legs off. So then it becomes, I need to get vengeance for my friend. That's a very, very simplistic explanation of it. But coming into LARP, or coming into this type of LARP, and I suppose all LARPs really, you can't necessarily expect people to just... don't expect people to be nice to you in character. Do expect people to be nice to you out of character. And if they're not, you should probably tell somebody about that, because people should always treat you with respect out of character, but people are not required to treat you with respect in character. And nobody has the right to a friendship with another character. You do have the right to be treated with respect out of character, but you can't necessarily demand that another character interacts with you you can make them interact with you, because if you stab them, that's an interaction. But they're not necessarily going to bring you into their group and make you a part of the plot line that they're chasing, because they may see you as a threat to that plot line. Yeah.
Chris, you have 30 seconds before we go to another question. Go.
We have tangented time.
Storytelling 101. Our game is a storytelling event, a group storytelling event, in fact. So you're dealing with multiple personalities, but the key of storytelling is conflict. Desmond was talking about how jealous he is of my fantastic library, which, by the way, suck it, Desmond. But also, there is not a single good book here that doesn't have conflict in it. So if you're expecting everyone to say yes to you, you're going to have a boring time.
Okay, people need to start putting questions in the chat, and admins need to stop answering them in the chat.
That one was a quick one, so I just
Okay, so I'm going back to Helena's list until I see a new question in the chat.
No, I
If
thought
you
I
missed
saw
a question,
one
if
that
you've missed a
wasn't
question,
answered
put it through again.
We have
There was one
from,
before
I believe Mr. Zerbel, one of our new players.
Yes, Ben.
Ben, yes. Quick question, as someone who hasn't attended a game yet but definitely hopes to, what advice you guys could give me for a first time in and out of game?
Water bottle. Sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
Those are always my first two answers. Water bottle and sunscreen. Comfy shoes. These are the practical things that I'm listing off. A hat. It is a sport. You will be on your feet, walking around a whole bunch. Hats.
Hats.
Yeah.
I can't stress enough how everyone should wear a hat. They're fun, they're fashionable, they
No hat,
make
no
you
play.
distinctive. And if you're not wearing a hat for your character, then you are boring. And that is my very strong personal opinion. I studied character and costume design, so I am
You
valid.
did? My goodness. This is news to me, Becky.
But on a much more serious note, I'd recommend visiting every camp on your first game. Giving every camp a visit. If you can, have a chat with the admin or with someone in that camp who can tell you about that camp. Because not knowing about what each of the camps' deal is and knowing a little bit about their structure can get you in trouble. But it's also just good to understand what everyone's vibe is so you can figure out where you want to go. So
You can also come and see me.
chat to everyone. Chat to Muz!
Yeah, you can come chat to me. I play Muz. Muz is like the roaming misc quest side quest guy. I know that I haven't been doing it to the extent that I want to. Like, people have been coming up to me and being like, "Give me a quest." I'm like, I didn't have anything planned. But I do have a proper list now, and it's also something that I am working on over the break. Just setting up a lot more of that structure so that it can be at a place where I will be happy with it and all of that stuff. So yes, come see me. My character partially exists for new players to come and be like, "What do I do?" And I'll give you a thing or point you in the right direction.
Prior to games, though, read the rules.
Yes,
Everybody should read the rules.
participant
Yeah.
agreement.
You don't need to memorize them, but have a general gist, because you'd be surprised how much you can do. And while we do run through the new player training and say, like, look, reread it between first and second game so you figure out all the stuff that you didn't know today. Yeah, knowing the bare bones of it makes it a lot less complicated. I guess my 2 points for brand new players, because I'm not going to cover any of the safety stuff because it's already been sort of handled. My two things are: be prepared to, just like starting any hobby or any sport, don't expect to be fantastic or heavily involved on your first day. Treat your first day as you're basically touring the idea of the events, and I guess make sure that you remember that your character is coming into a foreign setting. And so, just like if you're living in the Wild West and you came into a new town, the local townsfolk aren't instantly going to bring you in and make you their messiah. Like that, it's not the type of game we run. It's not, Skyrim, where you are literally the Dragonborn or whatever. It's just you might be the brightest star in your local region, but you've now come westward, and every other character here is a demigod. To some extent, they're all, compared to like the average person, these people are all insanely lucky and talented, and you will take time to find your feet. So please don't feel like your first event, if you're like, I don't know what was happening, try not to take that to heart. Maybe talk to the player base via the Facebook page or Discord or whatever. Post your first game and say, there were some things I was a bit confused about, and then people will help you to like find your place. The second thing is have a motivation. It doesn't need to be a full-fledged out backstory. You could absolutely have your character have nothing, like an amnesia. I don't even know what my species is. As long as you recommend like looking at the available species bare minimum, because if you rock up again wearing like a crocodile face, then like people are going to go, what the F is that, But yeah, if you rock up and just say like, yeah, look, I don't even really know what my character's spells are yet. If you're a wizard, for example, that's fine. Make your motivation, I'm here and I don't know who I am, and I need to figure out why that happened. And that's easy, because then when you're walking around finding people, you can go, yeah, when someone's like, oh, who are you? You just go, I don't know. Can you help me? And you'd be surprised how often the players, like, their need to be like, I'm helping, I'm important, kicks in. Then, that's a great way for you to be absorbed. But it can also be as simple as, I'm here because, like, I heard there's money to be made here. And that's fine. Find ways to make money. Talk to people, offer your services, maybe offer them a freebie to start with. Oh, you need an extra sword? I'll do this one time for free, and then if I like you, then like we can haggle. And anyone who's saying no to a free sword is, especially if it's a new face, it's not a known enemy, then yeah, like that person is probably missing out. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on another little piece of advice when it comes to, making your character, is something that I did with my very first character, was I very specifically made him a pleb. He's, you're familiar with Kasan the Pirate King. He did not start that way. He was just one of the crew, just a regular able-bodied sailor. He wasn't important. He didn't have any special powers. He was just a guy. And I did that so that I could, figure out the game, experience it all, and then like build up to being a really cool guy. Because something to consider as well is you're starting as a tier 1 character. It doesn't really make sense that it's like, oh, I'm this really cool guy, who's really powerful and all of that stuff, and then you come into the Weft and it's like, I can slow someone down a bit every now and then. that's it. That's all I can do. But just like going into it knowing that, okay, I'm playing a regular ass guy. I'm just a pleb, just a nobody, and that will let my focus be figuring out the game and figuring out the world and the lore and being able to focus on getting used to going to LARP for the first time. I worked for me. Maybe it'll work for some of you, of just like going out there and deliberately making your first character just some random dude so you can get used to the world.
I think one of the things that a lot of people kind of who've not had any kind of experience in what LARP is and what it's like, and again, as I said before, like our particular brand of or style of LARP is not something that's I've come across much before. Like it's very much a combination of a parlor LARP with combat. And as we said, it's the theatre sports is good training, but it doesn't fully prepare you for what a freeform roleplay combat experience is like. But one of the things that you will find is that if you've grown up playing video games, like as Chris mentioned, playing something like Skyrim, where you are the Dragonborn, and you are also the head of the Thieves Guild, and then you also become the head of the Mage Guild, and you also become the Assassin's Guild, and after a while you're just a god walking among mere ants, and you can be a warrior who also does magic, who is also can sneak up to somebody and steal their mustache hair without them knowing. It's LARP is not like that. Your skills are your skills. The game mechanics allow you to do some things that you physically might not be able to do, but most of that is stuff like magic. Your ability to convince people of things is how good are you at convincing people of things. Your ability to fight somebody with a sword is how good are you with a sword? So if you walk into the game and you don't have any martial arts experience, you've never picked up a weapon before, you've never done stage fighting, you've never done LARP, you've only ever played computer games and D&D, you're probably going to be in for a rude shock if you wander in and go, I am the greatest swordsman in Arcos, and I have slain entire armies and ridden dragons into the fires of Mount Doom and kicked Sauron in the ass.
Then you get stabbed in the back.
And then you fight the first person. You pick up a sword, and the first person that you fight just absolutely walks all over you, because at the end of the day, you're a tier 1 character and you don't have a lot of experience. But a lot of people come into the game with that kind of mentality, thinking that they're going to be the main character of this story. But the thing is, there are 110 people who come to games on a regular basis, and a lot of them have been there for 7 years. And they have a lot of experience in fighting. Their characters have done a lot of things. They've built their characters up to the tier 3 level. And I mean, something that I find wonderful about our game is that the difference between a tier 1 character and a tier 3 character is it's noticeable, but it's not insurmountable. There is not necessarily, like, just because you're fighting somebody who is a tier 3 when you're a tier 1, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win. Particularly if you pick your battles, and if you're a tier 1 warrior fighting in a sword fight with a tier 3 mage, there's a good chance that you're going to win if they don't have mage armor. But yeah, just being realistic about your own abilities and understanding where you fit into this grand scheme of things, and knowing that this isn't a computer game. There is no railroad tracks leading you where you need to go. You don't have 1,000 hit points where everybody else only has 5. So yeah, just being realistic, and then building your backstory accordingly. I literally did have somebody in game once come up to me and tell me that they once fought 3 shifters and killed them all with their bare hands, and I just assumed that person was insane or lying, because there is absolutely no way that they did that from a character like in-game lore perspective.
So long answer short. Curb your expectations a bit. Be prepared to lose at first, at least, and wear a hat and sunscreen and drink water.
And if you have come in and written that you took on 3 shifters with your bare hands, whatever, you can always chalk that up to, if you discover in the course of play that, oh my God, my character doesn't feel the way my character was written, that's fine. You can rewrite it very easily. I had a character that I took down to Swordcraft years ago, where I was running a guy who was supposed to be like a hero of the local rustic people, blah blah blah, and I didn't go overboard with his list of deeds, but just I found in the course of play that the story that I'd written didn't suit the camp of people that I was with, and so I was finding it very difficult to fit amongst them, and so after the first day, I took myself aside and like had my little moment of like, oh, I'm really disappointed. And then I just went, but I'm here for like a week. I need to do something about this. And so I just rewrote the character concept completely, and then had a swell time. And so if you have written, all right, I killed all these shifters with my bare hands, I'm the best fighter in my village, and you come out and you do get whooped by a single shifter who's not even in its moon form, they just like happen to have a knife and they've gone stab, haha, got you. You can always just, you don't need to feel like you were like done to write that or anything, because you don't know the setting the way that maybe veterans do. You can just retract that in your brain and go, okay, I now understand more what my character's capable of. When I talk about this, I can always say, well, I mean, they were really sick at the time. Or like you can say like, oh, 3, I must have misremembered, it was 1 and I had some help. Or
I
you
like
can
Gabby's comment of 3 shifters, 3 dogs with mange when you were drinking that one time.
Yes.
exactly right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I played up the entire
is
fact
useful.
that I completely changed my backstory for my first character, and I just later on I'd get called out and stuff and be like, "You think I was telling the truth?
Yeah.
Why would I tell you the truth about that? I just met you."
We have a
and that's the thing.
quick question with an easy answer. How does your character get a wiki page? You can make one yourself. I think there is a limit of like your account has to be more than like a couple days old before you can edit the page, but you can make one yourself. Just be aware that anything that you put there is considered public knowledge. So it's, I encourage you to only put stuff there that may have been overheard in the bore, or you have told or have made public. Don't put your entire edgy backstory on there, because that loses a lot of the drama and the mystery of other people engaging with your character if they've read your whole wiki page.
Yeah, best to keep your backstory in particular, like, oh yeah, I was secretly a spy for, the cult of the Nighthawk, blah, blah, blah. Like that kind of stuff. It's best for people to learn that, like, as they talk to you face to face. It can be such a crap time where you do the dramatic reveal, and because your friends have already read the wiki, they're like, oh, no way. Wow, cool, bro. Whereas, like no one knows Job's full backstory, so one of these days someone will, and it will be 8 years of build up, as opposed to just I wrote it and everyone knows what it is. So
it doesn't need to be admin approved. Just if there's any that we have a little disclaimer on the page where you make it that like anything that you put in there that doesn't line up with our lore will just be taken as your character making stuff up, basically. Because there are a lot of you, and all of you, like a decent amount of you, have like 3+ characters over time. So we can't go through and scour every single page. But yeah, it doesn't have to be admin approved. If there's anything you're feeling questionable about, like I wrote in my backstory that my character killed the previous Emperor of Lokai, just chuck us an email and we can hash it out.
Yeah.
Becky, any questions?
Okay. I'm gonna bounce back and forth between Helena and Des questions until more questions are put in the chat. What are the admin's favorite patrons / deities? Let's start with Addie, because you're in like the
Okay.
top.
Will we do like a circle like this? Or
Yeah.
for you guys it would be like this, but for me it's like this because
Yeah.
I'm flipped because it's my
You're the one
stream. Haha.
controlling it, but I think you're first.
Yeah. My favorite deity. I'm an absolute goblin, so the OGs for me are Nrayan and Rillian. Shocker. I really like. There was a lesser deity that I'm like, ooh, Turkuthlat. I like Turkuthlat. I like the story there. It's fun. It's groovy. It's a good time. Millie.
Well, what was the second part of the question? It was deity or
Just what's your favorite patron / deity?
Oh, okay. Well, probably Drocomet or
Naughty! You're the sentinel!
Scy'kadia.
I'm so
Can't-
shocked.
Can't play a
Amelia?
character for 3 years and not have some kind of attachment. Drocomet or possibly Narain. I do like that dichotomy of playing a character that follows both of them when they're often sometimes even at odds with each other, where one wants to be the protector and one wants to be the tempest and destroy. It can be quite fun and interesting to play.
Lean.
Circle back to me.
Hodgecles.
Yeah, look, my favorite deity is probably Trarkor.
That's pretty good.
But I had been playing a character that followed Trarkor for many, many years when I took on the role of Voice of Ruin, so I kind of didn't want to just make the same deity that I had been following for such a long time my patron. So I picked my second favorite one.
Notice how so far we've all picked deities that our characters have followed.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, why would they be your favorite if you're not following?
So, Becky, I'm gonna guess, would it be a
Love Squid.
certain soggy little tentacly boy?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, guys. I don't know. Maybe maybe I've just got a little bit. Yeah. I also I happen to beautiful. I happen to really like the Kraken.
Really?
Just a bit.
Oh my god!
Which is shocking, I know.
New information.
But I'm also very, 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 very fond of Rillian and of Trarkor. Because I came so close back in the day from being converted from the Kraken to Trarkor, and it was a very cool experience. And 10 out of 10 role playing and all of that. So yeah, but yeah, Kraken.
Also has tentacles.
Yeah, that's the main selling
Just
point.
in different places.
They're both Eldritch horrors, it's fine.
I
Cool.
will end. Chris.
Cool, we still
I think my favorite greater god would be the twins, Narain and Narod, partly because they're a direct transfer from a novel I was writing when I first started doing Scy'kadia. And if you ever see them in a book I write, it's because they are literally the same god. But basically, they were transported into this setting. And I like them because there are plenty of people who are like bloodthirsty, cowardly warlords who claim that they worship Balroth, but aren't necessarily like directly linked. Because just like real world religion, like you don't necessarily have to be like a priest calling down like divine miracles to say that you are a worshipper, you know. So like a lot of average Scy'kadians, you know, say that they worship, you know, Gaulur if they're out in the fields, but they're not necessarily like, you know, making offerings every day, you know, that sort of thing. Whereas I imagine that because of how capricious the sea literally is, I imagine that sailors and pirates across Scy'kadia and even Vilkish raiders and whatnot would be more actively devout than any other like god's followers, because like the second you put your foot on a boat and you're stuck in the sea, you are alive because of the whims of that god. So I like to think that they are in a lot of ways, yeah, like the most actively worshipped. I like of the Naga, I really like Victrix. because I imagine Victrix would be one of the hardest Naga to please and to follow. And I really like the concept of a champion or like just a servant of Victrix. Like a cult of Victrix might not be 100 people strong. It might be just 3 people. And those 3 people have risen to such a point of perfection through their worship in just one discipline that like they're just devastating and terrifying in a way that other worshippers, like a worshipper of Gorgos, that might just be a cult of like blood crazed savages who just go from village to village committing murders, but a servant of Victrix might just look like a regular person until you go to like draw your sword and find that your hand is already cut off and you're like, how the hell did that happen? And they're doing the anime thing where they're already behind you and they slide this faceless mask down and they're just like, that was a poor decision. Like, this is what I do. This is all I do, and like I'm the best at this. So yeah, mostly Victrix because of the followers. I find really interesting, and I think that actually in the Malazan Chronicles there are these warrior assassins called the Scy'kadia. I always imagine that cultists of Victrix are a lot like the Scy'kadia. So if you were planning on taking a look, read those books because there is a scene where like 3 of them in these faceless masks with no armor, just a couple of short swords, take on armies, and there's like the army's like, oh shit, 3 Scy'kadia, no thanks. Like, what else?
My dream build for a demon, I really want to build a Victrix demon one day. So bad.
Putting it on the field mechanically, I've thought about it too. Not so much the costuming, but representing it mechanically would be difficult. But God, if we could pull it off, it would be arguably the most deadly thing on Geth. And of the lesser deities, I really like a deity that Kathy Horniak was responsible for creating called Mir Enlith. We have had at least one objective aimed at this lesser deity because at one point there were 3 people worshipping it. Not so much at the moment, which is why it's taken a back seat because we were like, yeah, this is really cool. And then everyone just kind of disappeared, which again, that's part of the reason why these things happen. But essentially, it's a elemental protector deity in Fenaloth, Sindorian, like Green Fang Forest. And when the fallen elves were like sent away and sent to the Fairing Isles, they corrupted big chunks of the forest on their way out. And this elemental was so powerful that it was able to maintain its hold on sanity and fight off the corruption, except for some reason every time the ghost moon, so our regular moon, becomes full, it no longer becomes benevolent. It becomes quite capricious and quite like violent, and like elves know to stay the hell away from its glades. And I really like that idea because I'm a big fan of Athel. Is it Athel Loren in the old world Warhammer, where the dryads and treants and things are all like quite sinister? Yeah, so I like that one.
Nerd.
I'm very broadly read. Yes,
Tree
exactly.
Man.
Those treants.
Oh god,
Yeah.
I'm in a voice chat full of nerds. Ugh, disgusting.
How many pirate shanties do you know?
Like
Enough.
none, honestly. I don't know off the top of my head any shanties. I can follow along, but I cannot start them. So wrong question, Christopher.
Worst pirate.
Yep.
Victrix is hard to write objectives for.
Hmm.
How do you encapsulate the concept of perfection
Guilt.
in that
First.
in the game? Like, I don't feel qualified to embody perfection within the mechanics of the game, and trying to write objectives for my people and be like, you must do this perfectly.
I've seen your abs and I've heard you sing, so
I have a similar problem with Zorg at the moment. A lot of interest in Zorg at the moment as a deity. Besides the questions of is Zorg alive? Yes, you keep asking them. Yes, I'm going to give you a different answer every time.
some mysteries are intentional.
But more like, how do you encapsulate endurance and survival as like an objective beyond don't get hit today, and stuff like that, or chase that person across the field and that's just not. Some people just aren't physically capable of doing some of the things that demand of it. So it's been fun. You're fine, Maddie. I know it's if I'm vague, it's because I'm struggling.
I have an idea for an objective for Zorg.
Oh god.
Between the game that you ask for the objective and the following game, you are only allowed to sustain yourself on what you can physically catch. Welcome to Hunter Gatherer, biatches.
Okay, Lynn, I
Lynn.
think is ready to answer the question now.
Yeah. I had to do a quick wiki because I wanted to get the names right. Can folks hear me? Because I am far away from.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Obviously, Daddy D is probably my favorite. Drockenmet.
Daddy D.
I just wasn't sure that everyone listening would know that.
I would love to create a Zalil worshipper because I think there's a lot of nuance with Zalil and what she represents that we not necessarily have explored yet. Because you do think of very specific things when you think of Zalil.
Which we're not allowed to have at games.
Which we can't really represent in games, but there's a lot more nuance to what Zalil represents. And look, the going down the path of a seductress is totally valid. Very, very valid. I see a lot of ideas and I could go, oh, I could have so much fun with that. I'd love to do that, but in terms of layers and nuance and things like that, Archer created 6 elemental deities, and they are under the lesser gods page, and they're all aspects of the elements. But they're so lovely and nuanced that, and I've come to appreciate that as I've grown up as a LARPer. Anybody who knows me when I first started, I very much was the OG edgelord who, yeah, mistakes were made. I showed up to my first LARP with my lips sewn shut, so I didn't have to talk to anybody because I was so edgy.
Yeah, my first interaction with Lynn as a LARPer, Lynn was that person that sent me 6 pages of her backstory. And was like, hey, it's okay, it doesn't fit in with the law.
Oh my god, I love that. I feel like all of us have like cringy anecdotes of stuff that we did when we were first starting. I feel like we should share those later.
LARP costumes I can't look at. I'm just like, what was I doing?
But like as I've grown up as a human and as a LARPer, there's a lot to be said about nuance and dimension with your characters. I had to do some really serious rejigging of Gideon at one point because she didn't have the dimension that the game required for her to be engaging to players, and that's part of the problem when you play a demigod or a super powerful big bad. How the hell are you relatable to the average person in Guardian Vale?
Yeah.
So nuance is very, very important, and the elementals that Archer created are they were sort of my first exposure to really like nuanced deities within our world, and you can take any of those and be whatever alignment you like, basically. And it also allows you room to essentially be human, so to speak. Human as in nobody is entirely good or entirely bad. We are all shades of grey. So yeah, I really like those. I struggle to play the good guy, so I haven't given a lot of thought to the greater gods. Sorry about that.
I second what Lynn was saying about Zalil and all the greater deities. They're not just the god of like war or the god of like seduction. They're the god of, in Zalil's case, it's the god of I believe it's not seduction. It's like temptation or something, and greed. And greed is a big part of that because you know, like a worshiper of Zaleel doesn't need to be, you know, the svelte, like almost like Anne Rice vampire, like, oh, come to me, Bella, kind of thing. They can also be like, they can just be like the fat Lord Mayor who, like, you know, eats too much and accumulates gold and like starves the people to death. You know, that doesn't necessarily need to be a worshiper of Drocomet. That can be Zaleel too. The worshiper of Drocomet is the one that like works them to death as well. Like, you know, there's different layers because even Drocomet is like dominance and slavery, but like they are in very different if you look at them from a certain perspective. The same as like Balroth is not just the god of battle, god of courage. So a humble like seamstress could also be a firm worshipper of Balroth because it might be, you know, to say a horrible like edgy backstory, it could be that, you know, she lost her children to a plague and she is worshipping Balroth to have the courage to continue and like to find a new purpose in life. You know, you can work with that as well. She doesn't need to run around attacking people. You know, you can play that as a full-blown civilian.
As
Um,
the resident seamstress, I'd say just sewing is enough of a battle to.
Give me the courage to cross stitch.
Blood for the blood god.
Give me the patience to get through this entire line of undertaking.
I
A
mean,
seamstress who worships Gorgos.
I mean, I really like whenever, just like while we're talking about I promise this tangent's gonna be quick, I swear. But I really like the concept, or whenever players worship the pantheon, like a full pantheon, like they worship the Naga and they worship the greater gods, like you know, it's all of them. I like the whole, you know, the average farmer would pray to Gala for his crops to grow, and to Leander for, you know, nice good weather, and Rain Road for like rain and all of that, like all that stuff. Balroth for to ward off, you know, predators and stuff, the courage to ward off predators. I think I think I once made a whole list of why an average farmer, what circumstances an average farmer might pray to each each of the greater gods. But like that whole like praying for, you know, worshipping, it's always like irked me a little bit whenever people come in and be like, I worship this specific member of the pantheon and ignore the rest, or you know, the rest aren't valid worship, I only worship this one. It's like, no, it's the whole pantheon, you know. It's like it's you worship to all of them to get different things out of it. And healers and such are just really devoted to one specific one. That's always something I want to see more of all the time, of just like people worshipping the whole pantheon instead of just one member.
Mm. You reminded me, we've had over the years a few different people who have come in. The one exception to the idea of worshipping a pantheon is the idea of worshipping both as a single pantheon. We've had a few people ask whether or not, you know, their character could be like, in some cases, even like a divine healer who also worships the Naga as like a mirror image to the gods. But you got to remember, the whole point of the gods even entering Geth was literally because demons were running around murdering like mortals and devouring their souls. And so the whole concept of the gods is that they are the anti-ruin. Like they're spirits who are like, all mortal life is going to cease existing if we don't lend a hand. And so they've been fighting basically the first war of Geth since the dawn of time. And so yeah, as much as you might have a character who chooses to believe this, you're never mechanically going to be able to have a character who is both like a divine and a ruinous. And if you are playing a character who is a divine conduit of power, because you're like a priest of Balroth, for example, if you go around preaching that it's okay to worship Gorgos as well, do not be surprised if your character, like we hand you a slip of parchment that says your healing has gone. Because again, Balroth is listening to that, and you're going around preaching that their direct enemy is like good guys and they're fine. It's just another version of Balroth. Balroth would be like, piss off, it is. And like, sorry, you clearly don't understand my teachings. Gone. So yeah, if you're not playing a character who literally has divine power and you choose to believe that, I mean, I've never seen a Naga, so like, do they even exist? Like, you can play that, but yeah, do expect that there are enough people on Geth who have a literal link to the gods and the Naga that someone will eventually tell you, quote unquote, the truth. So yeah.
Lynn, you're first.
I forgot.
I was just gonna say that it's the sort of thing when you are playing a healer, you have to remember you are a healer because you are devout. And I see it a lot where people get a healer tier just so they can have a healer tier. And I always got a lot of fun out of really playing into the religious aspect and really playing into being a devout follower of this deity that could be very concerning. And I think if you're going to play a healer, you can get a lot of fun out of really leaning into the fact that you're devout. And it's more than just a mechanical thing. And unfortunately, I think I see it a lot where people just have healing as a mechanical thing, but you can have a lot of fun, a lot of roleplay opportunities by fully embracing the fact that your character has to be devout to this deity to have that power, and it can be fun. Do we want to move on to the next question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Annika has one in the chat, which is: are there any races that act like animals and don't just look like them, but in a nice way, not like a shifter?
Yeah, as we've always said, life elementary.
Yeah, life elementari take aspects of various animals in nature. Like most elementari, when they form, they might see something that interests them or piques them, and they form their body to incorporate that. As to acting like animals, well, life elementari will act like whatever they're around. If they form in a forest of only animals, then they're probably going to have a more animalistic approach. If they form in a major population center, they're probably going to be impacted by humans around there.
Yeah, look,
There's
I
a little
mean,
bit of-
the
sorry,
funny
you
thing
go.
is we as humans are very human-centric, but in a world where magic is real and elementari are a thing, there's no reason why an elementari wouldn't form a body and go and join a pack of wolves, for example, and speak with the wolves and become part of the wolf society, but they're just an elementari who looks like a wolf, but they would behave like the wolves around them because that's the society that they've chosen to join. Elementari who choose to join a human society would need, by necessity, to be able to communicate with humans. Otherwise, there's no point in them being there. So yeah, I don't see any reason why an elementari couldn't be fully animalistic, but obviously that's more of a background lore thing because we can't do, like, you can't just make a full animal costume and just speak like an animal and act like an animal. Otherwise, you'd just be an animal and someone would probably kill you and try and eat you.
Yes.
There's also a misconception, particularly about what life elementals appear as, because like when we wrote them with the idea that people sort of understood what a ganassi was, and when you look at ganassi in like D&D, they're not even entirely the same thing, because I believe they're only half elemental. Am I incorrect in remembering that? So they have like mortal frames, so they do look more ordinary human. But like a really good example of how our elementals, because they are formed from their element, a really good example is we had a satyr-looking character way back when we started called Asha, and her character was a fire elemental, and so the horns looked like they were made from fire, and there was makeup to look like the face was formed from fire, and like even the hooves were like red and had little flames and sparks on them, and the fur was more of like a flamey kind of color, and like everything about that, you looked at it and you didn't just instantly go, oh, it's like, I don't quite know what element that is. You instantly know fire. And what we get quite a bit is we get people who just rock up looking like a person and say, like, I am just like, I'm an elemental, and like, even people who don't necessarily even just put even the effort of like the makeup on, they just say, oh yeah, I'm an elemental of like, sometimes even like earth or like water, and they just look like a person. And that's, if your body is formed from water and ice, like that's, you can't tell, and so people will just behave like you're a human, and then again you're missing out on roleplay experiences because people don't know to look for you if they're looking for like a water elemental. And the thing about life in particular is, if an elemental did form a body and join a wolf pack, wolf isn't an element, life is. And so it would make a lot more sense if you're thinking about like Studio Ghibli films like God, what's that one? Princess Mononoke, like some of the spirit monsters in that. You see they've got like vines for like veins under their skin, and like they've got like oil all over their bodies and stuff, and it's like they might have an animalistic look, but it's clearly a spiritual entity. And that's sort of more like, again, what you'll find sometimes is because brand new players, and even some veterans who haven't read the lore in a while, will sometimes misunderstand whether a life elemental is a shifter or a life elemental because all they're seeing is animal parts on what looks to be a normal person. And so often people will go, "Oh, that shifter over there," and we go, "Shifters don't walk around looking half animal. That's not how that works." And like, "Oh, I just assumed because I just saw animal parts. I didn't see anything magical." So yeah, again, as I always say with the costuming, it boils down to the costuming isn't really for you, it's for other people to react to, and so that they know what to look for when they're trying to hunt down like an objective, like, oh, we need a life elemental. Again, if they just see like animal parts like tusks, and they might just go, oh, that's a half orc, and then they just carry on. But like if they see again like a person who's made their costume based off the boar god in Mononoke, then they go, that's clearly an elemental of some sort, and they will find you. So, sorry, that was long-winded. I didn't intend to go on like that.
It was valid and elucidating.
Yeah, like what, and this is a general, what everybody needs to remember about LARP is it is a collaborative storytelling effort. And whatever character you pick, like that would be honestly one of my bits of advice for newbies. Lone wolfing it doesn't work. Trying to be a standout, super unique, very rare insert thing here also doesn't work because you need to have a connection to the world around you. So it's all very well and good, in my humble opinion, to want to come in as a full animal, but how do you role play with everybody? How do you get people involved with you? How do you involve yourself with the game? My biggest concern about coming in as a full animal looking life elementary without any capacity or desire to engage with the mortal races around me is that's a really lonely game for you. So something to take into consideration when you're looking at building characters and stuff like that. How is it going to allow you to relate to the world around you and engage with the people around you? And Annika did say something else. I don't think that we have any sort of yays, nays, or whatever regarding languages, but as Millie says, like that would be a backstory thing in terms of you being able to talk to animals within game. There would be very limited opportunities for that. You wouldn't be able to talk to a shifter, for example. If there was a little critter in game as an objective item, you may find that you might be able to engage with that, but yeah, you kind of need to remember that you're there to interact with the other players. If you don't want to interact with other players, that's fine. If you just want to chill in the shade as a critter, totally fine. I worry that would be very lonely.
And bear in mind that because we have actually had rabbits as little critters that were discoverable in game, we might have an intention for what those things are in the game for. But if you say that you can talk to rabbits, that's all well and good. But if you were to pick those up and then try to tell other people what they want and whatever, and you're just making it up on the fly, you might be actively interfering with a plot. And we might not remember. I mean, I guarantee we won't remember that there is one character in the game who can speak to rabbits, unless we get very lucky and suddenly remember, oh, that's right. But even then, we're not likely to write out the like 15 pages of information that the creature has, because we're not going to be able to attach that to the creature in a way that is going to be satisfying in gameplay. So yeah, a lot of in fact, druids are about the only D&D class that I say to players, look, we cannot represent this in our setting, because you might say that your character can sometimes, like, what your version of vanish might be that you temporarily turn into a bird or a squirrel and run off and reappear. that's fine as far as that. You might, have an ability where like you're able to frenzy temporarily, and that might be that you take on aspects of a bear very temporarily, but like we can't force you to put on a bear costume every encounter, like and then take it off and then put it on, take it off. Like so yeah, druidic stuff like talking to animals is always going to be a tricky one, and it's best to just say like, if you find a little critter in game, it's like, oh, I can't understand their dialect. Oh well.
Yeah, and as you do know, Annika, like animals do engage with people in a variety of different ways. As I've talked about with bleed, though, at the end of the day, you're still a human brain.
And
And
the other thing is, if you're role playing a dog, and if you're as a human being at game behaving like a dog and interacting with people like a dog, that's going to get really annoying for other people really, really quickly because you're not a dog and they can't patch you.
It limits people's options for engagement with you, and it limits your options for engagement as well, which is why I would always recommend against it. But again, you get out a lot what you put into it, and so if that sort of thing is your jam, then it's your jam. As I said, I just worry it would be very lonely and very limiting and that sort of thing. And it's one of those things where I think there would be scope for that sort of thing at a very particular type of LARP, but the way Scy'kadia runs, I would worry about your fun and ability to be included. That is all.
What else have we got?
Next question. Mortals have gone to ruin traveling between domains of each Naga. Would something similar be able to happen, mortals traveling to the hold of the gods, or are they separated with each in their own sort of pocket?
They're a lot
Yeah,
more separated.
they're very much separated. I think even lore-wise, Chris said they're deliberately separated, and there's no way to really travel between the two for security purposes. I guess is the best way to explain it.
Ruin is a direct mirror dimension of the mortal plane, and each of the Naga, when they rose to power after the God War and everything, when the Naga arose and sort of took over, their influence and their personalities changed pockets of that one dimension. So it is all one thing that you can hop from. Kree's hold is literally in Nether, which is a separate dimension entirely. Narain Narod, it said like it's implied that like when you say sailors like, oh, your soul will go down to the bottom of the sea, whatever. In a lot of ways, it could be that their hold is literally at the base of the sea somewhere. Leander, like our version of the sun isn't necessarily an orb. Like characters don't necessarily know what it is. It's just the sun. So a lot of people do assume that like the hold of Leander is somewhere in the sun. So yeah, as was already said, they are completely separate dimensions. So hopping from one to the other would be difficult at
And-
I should
best.
probably clarify for that as well, like from the perspective of the story that was told there, for those people that were involved in that, you would notice that you never just walked from one to the other. There wasn't like a gate and security guards saying, welcome, you're now entering the hold of Zilliel, or would you please stamp your passport? It was always, there was some kind of magical door that was opened by the lamp that the group was carrying, that was created by Pandora and given this very specific purpose of guiding you through ruin. And the lantern allowed magical doors to be opened, and when you stepped through those doors, or when those transitions happened, it was very dreamlike, it was very mystical. And the way that I kind of see it is that if you were left to your own devices, you would never make it out of the domain of ruin that you found yourself in, unless the Naga in control of it allowed you to. And in this specific circumstance, there were essentially tears made in the fabric of reality that allowed the group to pass through into the next domain, regardless of the will of the Naga who was in control.
You all had plot armor and plot,
Yes, it was
plot GPS.
You're welcome.
Definitely plot armor and plot GPS. No mortal would be able to do that without those things in place. And yeah, while it might have seemed like you just went on one journey that just crossed all of the 9 realms, there were definitely subspace superhighways, wormholes essentially, that you traveled through to get to each of the different realms.
You'll also need to remember that this sort of stuff that we often do like this is not typical of the world.
Yeah.
No.
A lot of things that occur within game or even within characters, plots, objective items, and things like that are very much the exception to the rule. And with many things, your characters and their understanding of the world should be looking at some of these things going, that's not how it works.
Well, that was where I made a very specific point in the conversation that the group had with Victrix at the end of it, that A, they should have immediately died when they walked into the presence of Victrix, because you cannot gaze upon perfection.
And live.
The only reason that they were able to look at Victrix and live is because of the lantern. And they now all have to deal with the fact that their life is downhill from here because they've already experienced perfection. And that's going to be a psychological trauma for all of them for the rest of their lives.
I mean, that is the economy.
Therapist in the veil.
And the other thing of that is that Victrix literally said to them, nobody has ever done what you have done, and I intend to make sure that nobody ever does it again. And when Victrix says something like that, you know that that's going to be... when the god of perfection is looking to ensure that no mortal ever travels through the 9 realms without the interference of the Naga again, there's going to be some serious problems if you ever try and do it again.
And the inverse of what Chris was saying about how the holds are all, their own kind of spots. Ruin works very much in the inverse of that, of it wants to be part of Geth, because the demons and the Naga and everyone who is in Ruin wants that doorway to be open. They want to, demons want to be able to cross over into Geth and mess shit up, and the Naga want to be able to just slurp all of Geth into Ruin to do its torture and all that stuff. So it works differently in that sense, in that also Ruin wants those gateways to be weak and very easily openable.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Give me another question.
I can't see anything else in the chat, so back to here. Recently, you've been honest about the amount of plots/objectives happening at games, as well as how a lot of story is player-led or player-run. Does that mean that, theoretically, every objective/plot/funny little side quest has the opportunity to become holistic plot depending on player actions? Yes.
Yes. It's happened before many times.
I can tell you for a fact, 90% of the plots I run in Circle start because of something a player has said or done.
I could just say that
Yeah.
the plot for the Weekender for June next year is based off a conversation I had with a character at game that they brought to me. And
It's sick.
I just ran with it and developed it, and as time went on, it got bigger and bigger, and I went, you know what, I can turn this into the entire plot for the next Weekender. But it started as a player telling me something about a backstory thing that they did.
Now you have to work out which character and which backstory.
Well, the player of that character knows.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris.
Something that was actually part of some emails that we received recently, where it sort of brought something to mind that I wanted to talk to players about when it comes to player run plot, or in particular plots that players actually ask to do. We don't generally have an issue with them, but there is an issue that occurs if the player run plot, like if that does become a central thing, or if it becomes a long running situation. The idea is that I think we already hinted at it before. Some people will get in mind that they have a select, like, this is how it's going to end and this is when it's going to end, which isn't really a lot of fun for other players, because from their perspective, they're seeing what looks to be an issue or some drama or something, and their instinct is, this must be a plot. It must be something the admins wrote, which means it's a puzzle, which means that we have to fix it. And so a lot of the time players will bend over backwards to fix a thing, or to solve a problem that your character has put into the game, or to win the competition that you've got running. And if you don't have from the get-go this is what's happening, this is when it ends, then what will happen is the players will either hit roadblocks where like your objective seemingly doesn't end, and so they just go, oh well, I guess if we can't impact it, then we're just going to ignore it, and then it tapers off and doesn't become a plot. It becomes just something that you're doing in the background, and then yeah, vice versa. You can also get, actually not even vice versa. I think I'm mixing up my follow-up point in my brain because there's so many nuances to this particular point that have been occurring to me the last few days that I've been thinking about it. But yeah, I guess again, it's important to bear in mind that there are situations where you might want something that your character has been doing to become a holistic plot, and you might bring it to us and say, "Oh, I've been doing this thing, and wouldn't it be funny and cool if this happens?" And it can happen for like 6 games in a row. And what you might find is that we're forced to either say, "Well, 6 games is too much," and because otherwise, like, it's going to derail other objectives, it's going to like this or that, or you might just find that players themselves will just interrupt your plot, your story, because it has become such a big deal that it looks like something that needs solving. And in that case, it's not us pushing them to do it. It's just that's the nature of, you play a video game, something's happening, you expect that hitting X enough is going to solve it, and so do expect that if you try, this is the point, I guess, if you try or wish to specifically put character drama as a plot, as an objective that involves like a camp or several camps, please realize, as we've all learned, that it's gonna derail and it's gonna get out of your hands, and you cannot dictate the ending. You can have an idea, you can have several ways that something can be accomplished, but that thing could be accomplished in 5 minutes. It could be accomplished in 5 games. And try not to take it to heart if you were like, oh, this is going to be heaps and heaps of like drama and impact, and then it's just gone. Or in some cases, you're 3 games in and the players have just stopped engaging with it. It's because they've realized at this point it's just your drama. Yeah.
Yeah. On that note of players bringing quests and objectives and such to us, I know we go back and forth a fair bit of like, yes, tell us your backstories, and look, it has, you can't do that stuff. We might say no, blah blah blah. Like, we do switch between those. Just to clarify, it is like we are going to clean up those processes and everything for you know on our part. So it's something that we're going to talk about at our admin retreat of working with players. That's one of the big things on our agenda, of working with players for objectives and plots and stuff like that. And something that goes into that is like clearing up on our end our expectations, or the expectations that you should have for what a plot or an objective or some such looks like as part of our game, and on your end how you get that plot ideas and stuff to us in and we like actually pay attention to that, because I know that we're not the best at replying to emails and stuff, just because we do often have a lot of stuff going on. But we do really want to work on all this stuff with you guys. It's just a matter of putting the time and energy into like getting that structure in place so that we can do it more often, and it is simple, and every it's not a case of every side plot thing that a player brings to us is like, okay, yes, this is great, but now we have to like sit down and hash this out for like 5 hours to make it work, kind of thing. Like, it making it much more I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but much more, my brain's
Cohesive?
turned off. Does someone else have a word that would work?
Cohesive?
Yeah.
Compatible and satisfying.
Compatible and satisfying. That's good. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah.
One of the other things I think with that is that like we engaging with the stories at games and just looking at what is presented to you and reacting to what is presented in the way that your character would react to what is presented is kind of the core gameplay loop of Scy'kadia. And anything that your character does, or any decisions that they make, or any side things that they want to pursue, like, that's up to you at a game, and you can do that without emailing us about it. You don't need to, like, if you've got a side thing, if you've got a relationship with another character, if you want to do a certain thing at games, you can just do that at the game. We often find we have a lot of people that send us emails and they want to pursue certain things, and it's really great to see people so engaged in the game and so wanting to develop things. But but we have meetings and we plan our games in advance. We have a full documents over where the game is going and what the major objectives are that lead us into the weekender plots that are massive overarching things. And between all the stuff that all of us are putting into the game, like, that takes up most of our time. And that almost does become a full-time job unto itself. And all of our objectives and plot lines are written with the intention of getting as many people involved in them as possible. Which is where quite often we have to say to people, sorry, we really appreciate the thing that you're asking us to do, but quite often those things are personal things for that person, or will only affect a very small subset of the population. And that's where it's okay to just do those things at the game. That's one of the joys of freeform LARP. Like, we are making this up as we go along. There might not be a mechanical advantage for you, but that doesn't mean that the story can't happen. And that's where all those things that we talked about before, like being a devout follower of a god, that will lead you into the stories that you're kind of engaging with. But yeah, just wanted to encourage people that you can just, like, the way that you play the game is the story, and there are a lot of things that you don't need to ask permission for if it's not going to dramatically change the world, and if it's not going to require us to build props to put into the game, and if it's not going to require us to write mechanics that are very specific to the thing that you're wanting to do, then you're free to just do those things. One thing I did want to mention as an example of some of this stuff that we were just talking about before was at the June Weekender last year that I found quite really, it made me happy, and it also kind of made me a little bit frustrated, not because the players did it, but because I didn't have the time and capacity to engage with it because of all the other things that I had to do. But there was...
Which June Weekender? The one just gone?
Yes.
You said last year.
It's clearly 2024.
Future, baby. Yeah.
Sorry, last June Weekender. There was, like, over the course of the Weekender, I heard from so many people about how the silver that had turned into liquid had leached into a bunch of mushrooms that had been growing deep down in the mines, and that's what had driven the dwarves insane, and that's why the dwarves came out of the mine with silver all over them and started attacking people. And I sat there going, wow, this is... And they had been following this thing and trying to find out information about these mushrooms and things. There were no mushrooms. I never wrote anything in that story about mushrooms or leaching of silver into mushrooms, and that was not a part of the story that I wrote. But I had players coming to me, and some of them getting frustrated that they couldn't find out more about this thing that is definitely part of the story. And I sat there going, I really wish that I could make this part of the story because you are so passionate about it. And it made sense. Like, it was a logical conclusion for them to make. But in order to make that part of the story, I would have had to have time to build props and let everybody else who was a part of the NPC core and the admins, would need to get them all on the same page so that they would have the information to give to people, and I would need to have a reason for this to exist, and I'd have to have another counter objective as to how to destroy it and stop it, and then somebody else would probably need to be trying to get hold of that because it'd be valuable to them, and there's all these different things that need to happen for that objective to come to fruition, which in the middle of a weekend I don't have time to do. And that's And that's something that I want to say for those players who were doing that. And this is one of the things, like,
Don't be sorry, Helena.
for player-driven objectives, like 90% of the time, if we see that people are that passionate about that thing, and if that had happened at a game, the next game I would have had objectives in there about mushrooms and collecting them, and I would have given counter objectives to other people to try and different reasons for everyone to want those things so that there would be conflict over that. And that was a fantastic example of how player-driven plot could come to fruition, but the flip side of that is that sometimes player-driven plot doesn't have the backing of the admin team because they literally don't know about it. And we just can't necessarily on the fly give you a tightly tied up in a bow kind of conclusion to that story. So sometimes those things may not go where you want them to go. And that's sometimes the end of the story is that, oh, that was a red herring and it didn't actually do what I wanted it to do. Chris?
Yeah. Our philosophy of gameplay is that for the sake of immersion, we're not, unless there's literally no other choice, then we're not going to ask you to imagine a thing when we could put it in the game. So in that instance, because this is the first time I've actually heard about the silver mushrooms, and
I
it's
had no idea.
so there's a lot that we're not aware of because players will just say a thing and everyone else will blindly believe it and assume that it is an admin written thing, which is again part of the issue of like when we're trying to plan things and prepare and stuff. Even when you come like, oh, I've got this objective, we're like, well, now that conflicts with this rumor that's going on, and there's so much that goes on behind it as far as like logicking the steps so that we don't put people onto a wild goose chase, a wild hydra goose chase, if you will. No, I regret that. Take it back. Okay. But basically, with the idea of the mushrooms, if you find in the course of, say, a weekend, a day, that you haven't found a single physical trace of a thing, and there's no admin character openly saying, oh, yes, I've heard about that, that's definitely a thing that we should investigate. If we give you a blank stare and go, what? And you've found no physical proof, then assume that it's either a rumor or it's a deeply hidden thing. And then if you're like really passionate, then you can keep looking for it. But yeah, honestly.
Sorry, but this just made me think of I have had a player come up to me with an actual mushroom that they have found, and expected a reward for it because
Same.
it must be a plot object.
Yeah, same. An actual flower.
We aren't planting mushrooms, guys.
Now I kind of want to make a big mushroom circle. Just plant spores, see what happens.
Anyway,
Game.
and then
Circle.
The last time we had spores, we got Mandrakari.
True. I've been vaccinated. It's okay.
When do we want to stop, guys? Because we still have to have a meeting.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Let's give it until 1:30 because that's
Okay.
the next kind of milestone time that we've got.
Okay. I'm gonna say, pop any remaining questions you have in now, and we will try and get to them. I have 2 more Helena questions. One of them is really quick answer. Who came up with the concept of the Hydra Goose? Chris said it in passing, I think as a joke, and then I made it into a thing. And then, okay, the Discord events / pumpkins / enrichment have been an absolute delight. In the beginning, we were rolling for pumpkin. Animal mood size, how cute it was. Do you have a favorite result? And if you had infinite resources, time, and funds, would you have any of the results appear in a game?
I can answer the second part of that really easily.
I don't know
Absolutely,
how the pumpkins
we
work.
would.
I'm gonna leave this to Lynn.
Absolutely, with any silly nonsense that happens on Discord, if we had the infinite funds and everything, we would absolutely bring into game. That's why you haven't seen Asmodeus yet.
That's why you haven't seen the petting zoo at a game.
One day our son will come to game.
Yeah. Look. Oh, well, I'll address this while I smile over the shenanigans that my pumpkins have caused. Sometimes though, like as Chris did say that we try not to send people on a wild goose chase, but sometimes you're going to end up not discovering something about the thing you thought you were chasing. That's life. You can do everything right and still fail, as someone from one of the star things said. Wars or Trek, I can't remember which. Sometimes you don't get to solve the thing. Sometimes you end up with more questions than answers. And whilst most humans are completionists and we like closure, sometimes closure is not fun. And what I want people to remember, two things I want people to remember is, one, we are admins who are also human, contrary to popular belief, or what we would like. We are human. We have feelings. We have emotions. We have children in the background who are hungry, who we haven't fed for lunch yet. Like we have exhibit A. Some of us work 2 or 3 jobs. Some of us work 2 or 3 jobs and are at uni as well. Some of us work shift work and are at uni. Some of us just don't necessarily have capacity for everything at all times. And as Hodge has said, like, it's running Scy'kadia is another full-time job. There are so many things that we have to do to keep things running beyond just writing objectives. So I guess this is a very long-winded, and I don't want to sound preachy, but I'm going to kind of just bear in mind we're people and we do our damn best to put on awesome stuff for everyone. And we very much appreciate everybody's patience and consideration. And but yeah, just be a little gentle with us sometimes and be understanding sometimes if things don't go the way you think you would have liked them to go or how you thought they were going to go. It's difficult to write objectives and games and plots and things for over 100 people every fortnight. It's hard. If I could go back and start Scy'kadia again with Chris, we would not be running fortnightly, that's for sure. You know, we try to do champagne on a crappy beer budget, and that's always been something we've thought about. We want LARP to be accessible. We don't want it to be pay to win because you've got disposable income and can buy the coolest gear and armor and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is me just saying we try real hard, but sometimes life gets in the way. So please be kind. And
Yeah.
everybody is, really, to be honest. Like, I can't think of any single person who has been actively mean or disrespectful or nasty to us, or at the very least to me. I can't speak for everybody because I'm not in everybody's inboxes all the time. In everyone's cupboards, yes, but not inboxes. But yeah, we try our hardest, but we do have to live life as well. So remember, we're juggling your stuff, but 100 other people's stuff as well, plus our own. So thank you for understanding, I suppose.
Yeah.
Are you going to expand on that, Chris?
Mm.
Okay. On pumpkin knowledge.
Sorry, that was just like a really ominous
No, because yeah, again, like I come at a lot of this, especially the last few years, given how much experience we've all got. And since I've been watching it from the beginning and previous LARP groups, and I've been in other LARP groups, and basically we are on top of one of the most regular, I think we are the most regular actual LARPing, like role play based storytelling game on this side of the country, you know. On top of that, we also charge just what covers our insurance and venue hire, and like a gold coin donation that often goes towards hiring weekender venues, or as I say, like we might have just enough money to scrape by to get like the lighting for the Dragon Den, like one thing at a weekender. The alternative to us running the way that we currently do is to charge everybody $30 every time they attend. so that we could all afford to actually live off it, and then we would have the time to put off regular work and like auditioning for plays and all the other stuff, and university work and all that other stuff. Like if we were actually earning a living from this, we could afford to put the time in to actually like fine tooth comb through everybody's backstory and have like the red thread like diagrams of every player who's currently active, and like we could afford to have apps that allow you to do all this other cool stuff between games where you don't have to email us, and it could have automatic email responses and things like. Or the other alternative is that we could charge something like $250 a ticket, and we do one event every year, like College of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which has a lot of plot and actors hired, but that's because they're earning something like $250,000 for the event, and so they can afford to do it. We're getting 100 people, a gold coin each, like $100, and then hiring our weekender events. We do them twice a year. They cost thousands of dollars just for the venue. And then we also, again, are often paying out of our own pocket for like building monsters. You'd be surprised how much we actually paid just to build those like puppet machines that and as far as how much use they're going to get in future, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to repurpose them, maybe not, but that was a lot of time and effort, especially on Addie's behalf. So yeah, it is one of those things where, again, I know that we don't make a big deal out of this to the player base because we just want you to just rock up and have fun. But there are, a lot of limitations based on how the play base now expects the games to be and how we want you to have your fortnightly fix. Like even the delays that we've had with this game now, like the fact that we had to cancel because the ground is basically mud. Like I'm looking at my own garden. It's crazy. We hate that. Like we don't want to push that back because as well it's we know that the players are so passionate about what we're doing, even when they're finding that they might have an off day and they don't know why it's happened, and we know that unfortunately behind the scenes it might be something like this happened, or we didn't have the money to make this happen, or like we didn't have the time to like necessarily put that plot into the game now because we didn't have the time to like balance it out and make sure that it wasn't going to upset people. And so there's a lot going on, and we do appreciate the players who understand that, and like, we're not expecting people to not feel frustrated sometimes or to not feel like confused or whatever, but I feel like these conversations and being as blunt as possible about what we are working with behind the scenes, I think that really benefits everybody because
feelings are valid.
Yeah,
it's how you respond to them and then how you treat other people that's where it becomes problematic. If you utilize those feelings as a excuse to berate, belittle, and be mean. So Annie's got their fingers crossed.
Just on the note of Scy'kadia finances and stuff, and Peter's asked, would you guys be open to receiving player donations towards these things? We are open to receiving donations and such. You obviously absolutely don't have to, but it is greatly appreciated because then we can do that stuff for you. It is also, again, this is something that we will discuss at the retreat, and we're not going to go into any more detail about it today or until we have the retreat because we still haven't properly discussed it yet. But something that is on the agenda is looking at our finances and how we charge for games, and if/how we shake that up so that we can do more stuff and the admins aren't so out of pocket for making monsters and things like that, so that more of that stuff can come from the Scy'kadia finances and all that stuff. So it is something that we're looking at. I'm flagging it now so that you're not shocked if the current system changes. But we don't know how or what or anything yet. It's just flagging that as something we may discuss.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out, again, for context, I bought 3 very small props from a discount store yesterday for today's game that got cancelled. Together, those 3 props were 20-something bucks. And I'm not taking that out from what Scy'kadia makes. That was just me putting in because it was there. I saw it. We bought it. But again, yeah, if we were just taking like for the standard props of a regular game from the donations that are given, that's a fifth of the donations gone in just one objective. So yeah, it's given the world we're living in at the moment, it is like ideally it would be amazing if we could have like light up portal that with like speakers and all this other cool stuff and doors that like you put your hand on a sensor plate and like the runes glow and all that kind of stuff would be sick. The style of event that we run at the moment is heavily limited by time, resources, people to make stuff, people to play the NPCs, because we also, as far as like we did have a bit of feedback from someone recently about their experience at other LARPs being that there were more NPCs and more random monsters, but like our player base all have their characters they're connected to, and so we don't want to ask a fifth of the player base to play monsters for a game, because that's not what you paid to do there. So like, and we do put out calls for NPCs, but again, if we get like one person who's interested, then that plot doesn't go ahead. So
yeah, we also to just further clarify, we don't make any money from Scy'kadia. All of the money that you give Scy'kadia goes to Scy'kadia. We don't get any of it. we don't see a penny.
even if we did, what are we going to split like 6 ways, $100? That doesn't cover a meal anymore. That's yikes.
Lynn.
Was Lynn first?
I think Lynn was first because Lynn had fingers crossed when I also had my fingers crossed.
I wanted to acknowledge Mel in the corner over there.
No, you need to point the other way, Lynn, because it's flipped.
Well,
there we go. Yeah, nailed it.
It's both ways. Mally is just being lovely. I just wanted a couple of things to note. Bertie has posted a couple of points of clarification about the College of Wizardry, but even the fact that Bertie's mentioned that volunteers are NPCs because most of the funds is purely spent on location and food alone. Like, it's expensive to hire venues, and Bertie, thank you for the very kind compliment. Bertie has said that I've been to a lot of LARPs and this is the most being done for the price and the frequency.
Oh.
Scy'kadia, when Chris and I floated the idea all of those years ago, Scy'kadia was very much a labour of love. We never intended for it to become a profession or the thing that we did to earn an income. It was a cool hobby that we liked, and we wanted other people to like it too. And that's why we do this. We live for the enjoyment that we see on everyone's faces after a game. It's very, very wonderful, and that's why we do it. So this is not us sitting here going, woe is us, look at all the effort we do for you lot, bow to us and all of that kind of stuff. It's just this is what goes into it. And people have been approaching Hodge and I recently about, hey, can you guys give us some advice on how we can start our own LARP? And the very first thing we usually say is don't. Because it's a lot. It is a lot. And it takes a lot, and you've got to have some thick skin as well. But we love LARP. We love LARP. We love the community. We love how much enjoyment that this all brings. There is so much that goes on behind the scenes, and one of the things that has cropped up in feedback forms thus far has been, you'll need to accept more player help. And yeah, we do. And a couple of people have spoken to me about ways they can offer help. The difficulty we have when we tap into people for help is then there's no surprise for you. If we get you to make a thing for us, but you don't get to be in the thing, or like you then know a big thing about the game, and it's not that we don't think you can keep a secret, because most of you can, but you lose a bit of wonder in discovering some of these things. So it's a very fine balance for us between wanting to accept the consistently generous offers of help that we always get, and not wanting to put players out by requiring players to spend money and time and things on creating stuff, not wanting to take players away from their characters, wanting players to actually do the thing that they pay to do, which is explore the world and engage in story. There's just a lot of consideration. So it's not that we don't want the help, we need the help, but we have to, what usually wins over, do the admins stay up till 4 a.m. building things and printing things, and then the players are surprised and they get to enjoy a cool thing? Or do we farm out all of the stuff and players are kind of forewarned and it loses that mystical factor? And honestly, for the most part, you guys having fun is what wins. I know we have all had a lot of sleepless nights because we've been up doing stuff, because we work our hours and then we have to do this afterwards or when the kids go to bed. So yeah, it is a thing. Becky, are you going to continue this kind of thing?
I'm gonna circle back to a point that Chris had, but you can continue.
Yep, no. Here, I'll save pumpkin stuff for after we're finished with this.
Okay. Just one little thing on NPCs. If you don't know, somehow we have the NPC Corps, which is our group of people who are willing to play NPCs. I manage the NPC Corps. If you want to join the NPC Corps, shoot us an email and just let me know the sort of characters that you have strengths in, if you'd be willing to play a monster or not, and that sort of thing. When you join the NPC Corps, you are not joining to, and this is something that confuses people a lot, you are not creating NPCs. Do not join the NPC Corps if you're like, yeah, I have this cool character I want to play, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm going to join the NPC Corps to play that character, play that NPC. That's not what it's for. If you have an idea like that, send us an email. But if joining the NPC Corps is for when we need NPCs for a weekender, like the Firebrands, or like
Witches.
I'm thinking of other ones. The Elementals that we had at the end of last year, the Witches. If you want to play an NPC like that, we create the characters and we workshop them with you and create them. So if you want to do that sort of thing, and if you have the kit, if you have the ability to, send us an email. We'd love to have more people in the NPC Corps, because the more people we have willing to play NPCs, the more we can do at weekenders. We can have cooler fights, we can do cool things, and it's a lot of fun being an NPC. I had to specifically ban everyone who played a Firebrand at the June weekender from agreeing to play a NPC at the October weekender, because within 12 months, everyone in that group had played a minimum of like 3 NPCs. And I think Gabby and Tom had played about 7 NPCs within 12 months, because they just enjoy it so much and get a good kick out of it.
Stop it.
They
Play
need
your
the chance to
characters.
play their own characters. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you want to be an NPC, please send an email. Would love to have you on the team. But it is not a chance to play your own NPC ideas. If you have NPC ideas that you think are cool, send us a separate email about that.
And please be prepared to follow instruction, because there may be some NPCs that have a broad scope of how they can behave. We might just say, this is the core concept, do what you want with it. But in the vast majority of cases, if the point of the game is, okay, we have a special bandit crew who are coming in, it might be they're being mind controlled by a particular thing, and this is designed to be a combat encounter, or this is designed to be, an encounter that only an entertainer can fix. And so if you deviate from essentially the script, then basically what you're doing is that objective is no longer there, and the point of asking you to be that NPC is now void, and essentially it can derail the entire story, which is another reason why we're sometimes selective with like who's doing what NPC and whatnot. Like if we know that what you want to do is just have some fun running around as a random goblin, then again, please don't volunteer to then be like, the ghost of the wizard who has this particular thing, and it's like only a certain character can see them. If you just want to go off and do your own thing, because that's
more of an acting role than a LARPing role.
Yeah.
It's a tool. It's a tool for storytelling as opposed to a player. Lynn, pumpkins?
Pumpkin time.
Look at that.
Becky, before I launch into pumpkin things, do we have any other questions that we want to get to before I very quickly do pumpkin things and then we call it?
Well, we're somewhat over time already.
Well, I don't think there were any other questions I've seen that haven't
One-
been answered in the chat.
One thing that I was going to add from a point just a few minutes ago is that it's interesting having had to postpone this game because we now have what would have been 2 games worth of tying off loose ends of extended plots over the course of the year that are now going to be squished into one game. The next game is going to be insane.
Which is why we have a meeting after this.
Yes.
How do you put 3 games of plot into one?
So please,
TM.
I mean, we just hope so badly that it is not like 40 degrees or pouring with rain for the next game.
Swear
and
to God.
I'd
if
actually
it's not,
cry.
please try and come, because there are a lot of plots that revolve around very specific people because they have become the foe. Some of
Cough,
them are
cough,
player-driven
Pandora,
plots
cough,
that have
cough.
just ended up causing a lot of problems and consequences. And yeah, if those players aren't able to be there, then there's a lot of stuff that's gonna have to carry over to next year. But yeah.
Honestly, I'm looking at indoor venues that we could get for free, just in case. But you often can't do that unless you book it in advance, and you've got to pay for it up front. And then if you don't use it, well, tough. You've paid for it anyway. Pumpkin time.
Pumpkin time.
I'm knocking on wood. I think this is wood. Is this wood?
Everyone, knock on wood.
Yes.
Christopher, slap your bookcase.
That's wood, I think.
Christopher, you're not slapping your
Particle board.
bookcase.
Particle board.
I refuse to be superstitious about it.
So, the pumpkins, as the Discordians have affectionately started calling the enrichment activities that I've been throwing into Discord, started off as pure shenanigans and flippant thoughts that I had while I was writing governance and policy, or in a meeting and somebody said something and I was just like, or somebody said something in Discord and I was just like, a lot of the pumpkins have resulted from people saying things and then a week later I drop it in. One thing that I have always been a very big fan of is playing the long game. Gideon was very much about forward planning and playing the long game, and that is something to bear in mind with our objectives and plots as well. You might not get a resolution right then and there, but you might in 6 months' time. Or you'll get to the October weekender next year and look back at stuff that happened at the June weekender this year and go, and then the conspiracy nuts and the conspiracy boards will start to make sense.
I mean, how long was the Military plot percolating for?
Milsery was percolating for some time. The June weekender plot started when
Someone planted
That's-
the Mandrake.
Start of this year?
So like these things do percolate and we play the long game. The fog monster, I think, has been the pumpkin that has caused the most sensation, consternation, engagement, and it was a flippant comment that I made, and then someone jumped on it, and as Hodge said about the silver infused mushrooms, you all just latched onto that one tiny detail that I put in about fog, and it became bigger than Ben-Hur. If I could figure out a way to put the fog monster into an event, I would. But short of getting like a wacky inflatable arm flailing tube man or pumping a crap ton of fog machines across,
I'll bring a fog machine to
Yeah,
him.
I've got a
Yeah.
fogger. I've got a
We got
fogger.
a fogger.
like, how do I physically represent a fog monster? I'm
having ideas now.
A wall of people in grey jumpsuits just walking around going fog noise, fog
yeah,
noise, fog noise.
fog noise.
Fog horns.
Foghorn. Oh no, I hate it. The other thing, I stopped doing pumpkins in Discord for a little while, because Discord is a supplement to our games, and because there was a lot of enrichment and stuff happening on Discord, so I've got to take the blame for this one, and it brings me so much joy to see my shenanigans come to fruition and the resulting chaos that they cause. But it concerns me as a grown-up when people are online at 3 a.m. role-playing. it concerns me as a grown-up when a live action role play starts to feel more like a chat room and people start looking for in-game solutions online. So I tried to pull back the pumpkins. So the pumpkins at the moment, they're building to something. You'll just have to wait and see what. But you're not going to solve game objectives on Discord is basically what I'm trying to get at.
In fact, they're
Discord
not
is
even going to climax on Discord. This is all just build up. All climaxes and everything will happen at game.
Yeah, because that's why we laugh, because it's live action roleplay. And another thing that Discord I kind of feel like has done is that Discord kind of does give us a bit of a false sense of security or a lack thereof surrounding the camps. Because all, like, most of the channels on Discord are open, your character on Discord can walk into clan and you can access the base camp freely, for example. But if you're constantly doing that, then you build up the expectation, and it's not your fault as a player, it's just the way the format of the role play works on Discord. You have then this expectation that when I show up to a camp in game, I have to be let in because I have the access on the Discord. And it's not exclusive to people who play on Discord, so please don't think I'm crapping on anybody on Discord. I am just as enthused about Discord roleplay as anybody. But I wanted to try and bring a bit of a balance between providing online enrichment for those of you who enjoy it so much. And it brings me great joy to see that my pumpkins are so well received and everyone gets so excited about them. I genuinely do feel like I'm yeeting a frozen pumpkin into a bunch of figures and they're just batting it around and playing with it. But I just want people to remember that it is a supplement. It's not going to be where the problems get solved. There are sometimes activities and events that we run on Discord which are really fun and really cool, but even those are just a lead-in to the shenanigans that you're going to find at game. So that kind of went off on a bit of a tangent, but I thought it was important to point out that Discord is a supplement and it's not necessarily reflective of how the camps and stuff actually should work, because why would I let Sandman into my camp?
Because you can't stop me.
I can try real hard.
The other thing is that we really want for players who don't roleplay on Discord should not be being penalized
They shouldn't
when
be
they turn up to
stuff.
games and just don't have any idea, and all the Discord people know exactly what's going on and have all these cool plot threads to follow. The game is not built that way. Just because you spend 8 hours a day role playing on Discord in between games doesn't mean that you're going to have any advantage over somebody who works nights and has 6 kids and can't be on Discord. They should still be able to turn up to the game and have just as much of a chance to achieve objectives as anybody else.
So it's a balancing act. We want, Discord is there for a purpose. Discord is there for you guys to flesh out characters and build those relationships to an extent. We would love to see that happen at a game more often, and y'all are pretty good at balancing that. I would like to see you go to bed earlier, just saying. But
I work shift work.
Yeah, okay, shift work, I can understand very much a weird schedule there. That's totally fine. But, I've noticed a lot of people, myself included, who are online at 1:32 a.m. and have to be up at 6. So be healthy and don't let your FOMO take over, because you are not going to miss out on core objectives if you go to bed.
Gabby said Discord is also not the entire player base. Just because you have a Discord friendship with someone from one camp does not mean that camp knows who you are. This is something I learnt hard back in the day. Yeah, absolutely accurate.
100%. And and we are not all encompassing either. So we do a lot of observing of Discord things, but we can't be everywhere, everywhen, all at once. So we try really hard to provide fun times for those who can access Discord, because we want you to have fun. We want you to engage with cool stuff. It brings me great joy to know Samantha has a very exorbitant spreadsheet with NPCs and animals and friends and shenanigans, and that's wonderful. It means we build a really rich world as well, and the world starts to feel a little bit bigger than Guardian Vale, which 2024, watch this space. But it's definitely was never intended to be the focal point. So yeah, Fog Monster is probably the one thing I wish I could physically bring into a game. And if I had infinite resources, I'm sure I could figure out a way, or collectively we could figure out a way to do that. The other thing that I would love to see in a game that has originated on Discord, I'd love to bring Kronk in. I'd love to bring Man. I would love to bring some of those beloved core. I'd love to bring Bastion in. Cinder Sniff, Nutmeg. Well, half of Nutmeg. Like, I'd love to be able to do those sorts of things. And I mean, we know a guy who's about, 6'8" and has metal armor. So Bastion